Thank you, Councillor. So I will return to part 2, which says, can you see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members? So if you could please qualify that, that would be good. Thank you. Thank you. So now we're back and have sorted out that little glitch. And also, can you confirm that the location you are participating from is secure to ensure deliberations are confidential?
Yeah,
Secure.
my help is gone.
Yeah, secure, only me and Putty.
Good. So I can confirm that you are secure where you are, and we can begin the meeting.
In the space.
So the Victorian Government announcement on the 23rd of April 2020 amendments to the COVID-19 Emergency Measures Bill 2020, which relates to the Local Government Act 2020, allowing council meetings to be conducted by electronic means. Video conferencing from May 1, 2020 until 1 November 2020. The amendments have provision that councillors will be able to electronically attend council meetings, and the requirement that council meetings be open to the public will be satisfied where the meeting is live streamed. The amendments do not inhibit councillors from attending a meeting in person in the council chamber. And I might add that there are 3 council members here in the chamber. Members of the public are invited to view the council meeting live stream by following the link on council's website or Facebook page. So now, on behalf of council, I would like to acknowledge the Gunai-Kurnai people, the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered, and pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. Now, our CEO, Mr. Anthony Basford, is also live streaming today. So 1.2, Mr. Basford, do we have any apologies, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we do. We have an apology from Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. 1.3, declaration of conflict of interest.
Mr. Mayor, I have not received any conflicts of interest declarations.
Well, okay, so I'm sorry about that, because I do have Ms Weigel, and she may speak to her conflict of interest going forward to item 5.1.3. So Ms Weigel, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict of interest for item 5.1.3 as I'm a property owner in the vicinity.
Thank you. So when we get to item 5.1.3, you will excuse yourself and leave the chamber. Thank you. So 1.4 is the confirmation of minutes from our meeting of June 2, 2020. So would somebody like to move? Thank you, Councillor Reeves, a seconder. Councillor Rotino. All those in favour?
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. I've got that this time, Councillor Ellis. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. That was unanimous. Now, our next meeting, this is item 1.5, our next meeting will be on Tuesday the 7th of July 2020 to be held here at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 1 p.m. And members of the public are invited to view the next council meeting by the following live stream link on council's website or Facebook page. So 1.6, Mr CEO, do we have any requests for leave of absence?
No, we do not, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So 1.7, request to speak about your community project.
There are no requests to speak, Mr Mayor, but I do note that there are some requests to speak to items later in the agenda.
Yes, I have them noted. Thank you. And we have Mr Canizaro will be looking after that for you. So at 1.8, public question time. To assume
no questions have been received, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So 1.9 is petitions. So I believe Councillor Ellis, you would wish to speak during this segment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to advise Council that yesterday I was presented with a 42 plus signatured petition objecting to the tendered sale of council land situated at 20 Hardy Street, Lakes Entrance. The property is currently on the market for open tender, which closes at 5 p.m. on the 30th of June 2020. I ask that this petition be tabled today for further discussion at the next ordinary meeting of Council, which I believe will be on the 7th of July 2020. And that's the best I can do with our remote meetings.
No, duly noted. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. And you wish to present that at our July meeting?
I will arrange for it to be handed to an officer in the next day, and for it to be processed and circulated to councillors, and for a response to be provided by officers for discussion at the next meeting.
Thank
If I
you.
may, Mr Mayor, please.
Yes, Councillor Peltz.
I'm just curious, Councillor Ellis, is that to do with what we're looking at today? Is that part of that, one of the items we're looking at later today, or not?
No, I don't think so. It's
not on our schedule for today.
you can pick it up if it is.
No, that's at Nungurna, I think, is that piece of land.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, just to-
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
This is a matter that came before council at the last, I think at the not the last ordinary meeting, the ordinary meeting before, in a block of properties that we decided to put up for sale. Might have been in far back as March or April anyhow.
Oh, thank you for clarifying that. That's
Thank
it,
you,
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Peltz.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. So that moves us to notices of motion and or rescission, Mr CEO.
None have been received, Mr Mayor.
Also, item 3, deferred business.
There is no deferred business, Mr Mayor.
All right, that moves us to our councillor and delegate reports. Now, it is only 2 weeks since our last discussion on what we've done and where we've been, but I still will throw it open. But I expect that some councillors may not have a lot to add, but a couple of councillors have made a request to speak today in their council reports. So I'll throw this open to. Maybe I'll start with the screen with Councillor Buckley, please. Have you got anything to report from the last 2 weeks? Councillor Buckley, you're on mute.
Yeah, I've got it off now. Yeah, no, I'm clean, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Yes. Just a couple of matters. Well, I won't refer to meetings I've attended remotely. I'll place that in my written report, Mr Mayor. But a couple of matters of consequence for our Aboriginal community I'd like to bring to the attention of Council. In the Queen's Birthday Awards, recently 3 members of the Lakes Entrance community, 2 of whom are Aboriginal artists, Francis Harrison and Mr Lenny Hayes, along with another lady whose name is suddenly blocked out of my mind. I'll keep talking and she'll come back. I know her very well. Were awarded the Order of Australia Medal for their contribution to Aboriginal art and generally to the community of East Gippsland. It's quite a substantial award and quite important, and I congratulate those 3 people on those particular awards. We haven't had an Aboriginal person from our community awarded with such an honour, and since about as far back as 1985, when Nessie Stuka, some of you may remember her, was a leader in promoting the welfare of Aboriginal people through not only our region but statewide, and was the founder of a number of important early actions in promoting and in bettering the welfare of our Aboriginal community. So that is the most important, because these people are real, genuine community people and workers. So I would like to think that you, Mr Mayor, could send a quiet letter of congratulations to each of those people. And on the 3rd person is Catherine Larkin, and I do apologise.
Well done, you found it.
yeah, it's just one of those things, you know. Now, the other interesting thing that's happened parochially for us here in East Gippsland is that we do now have another member of the federal parliament. And on the weekend, we had a person appointed to replace the leader of the Greens, Richard Di Natale. And Miss Thorpe, Lydia Thorpe, was appointed to take his place in the Senate. So we have from one of our small towns, Lakes Entrance, a member from the left and a member from the right representing our community of East Gippsland. And I'm really keen to see them succeed in promoting our region and doing the very best for all of us. So congratulations to Lydia for being appointed to the Senate of Australia. That, I should say, is about all we need, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Ellis, because you just tore my report to the public to shreds by going before me. But I still would like to say a few words. Read those awards. So forgive me if I become repetitious, but I would still like to say a few words to those people. Councillor Peltz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to highlight the hot topic of the COVID-19 proposal, what Rural Councils has been working on our behalf. And I had a radio hookup with ABC yesterday morning, ABC Gippsland, in regards to it. But it has been proposed by Rural Councils that we advocate to the state government that they seriously consider rewarding good behaviour in areas where COVID hasn't been so flush, and that not all everything fits one size. And we believe that the state government should concentrate on the hotspot areas and maybe perhaps do some kind of innovative mobile COVID testing stations in and around those hotspots, a bit like a breathalyser testing station, and try to contain members of their community within their community, so the rest of us can get on with, doing what we've been doing and waiting for the businesses to be able to open so our economy can get back on scale. So I just wanted to alert you all that Rural Councils is working quickly in the space, trying to advocate that, it should be contained to the urban areas and that the rural areas should be able to get on with life as usual. So, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, and thank you to anybody who's listening. We don't have a sense of how many people are out there today, but good afternoon, Womaninji. Councillors, there's two things that I want to raise, and the first is just acknowledgement from the state government of a grant tranche that was awarded only today and announced only today of up to $50,000, and some of our local community groups are recipients of those grants, which is very timely given that we're 6 months since the bushfire event. And that includes the likes of Crescendo, Lake Tyers Beach Hall, the Mallacoota District Business and Tourism Association, and East Gippsland Marketing. And I think that that's just fantastic. It's timely, and it's when those sort of grants hit those community groups is where the rubber hits the road. The second point I wanted to raise, councillors, is to advocate on behalf of our friends at the Orbost Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And just to remind councillors of, again, 6 months ago, that fire that devastated Cape Conran also devastated one of the most important economic drivers in this part of East Gippsland. And you might be aware that while most of the fire damaged areas around Conran are scheduled to be completed and refurbished by September, so the next school holidays in spring, the main issue is around the cabins. Now, 3 of the 7 cabins and the office and the manager's residence were levelled by that fire. And this only leaves 4 cabins and a lodge standing, but no infrastructure to support those, the water systems, the PVC pipes and so on. These cabins, councillors, as you can appreciate, are absolutely critical to the local economy. And there's an opportunity, I think, for us to advocate as a council to the state government and to Parks Victoria to not just reinstate but to improve that facility. This is absolutely critical for the visitor economy. It's one of the few places along the wilderness coast from Eden almost to Port Albert where you can have accommodation on the beachfront. And at the moment it doesn't exist. And look, there are complexities that Parks has to deal with around those rebuildings and getting planning permits and hazardous material removal. We understand all of that. But councillors, I just ask for your support to advocate to the state government and to plead for Parks Victoria to look at not just reinstating but improving those facilities. They were built back in the late 80s, so they are well due for refurbishment. And I just hope that you will support me and the Orbost Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who need a couple of goals kicked at the moment. They're like the Blues, we do all right, and then nothing happens for a while. So if you can just take that on board, councillors, and I will table this report so that it's on the record. Thanks, Mayor and councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves, but I would like to just say that I don't think the Orbost community is anything like the Blues. So, but thanks for your tip. Councillor O'Connell.
You're forever positive and hopeful.
Thanks, Mayor. I have nothing to report this over the last couple of weeks. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So, Councillor Toohey.
I have nothing to report for the last fortnight. Thank you.
Good, and Councillor Rottino.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just would like to quickly mention the webinar that yourself and Councillor Reeves and Councillor Ellis and I attended. Was put on by Bushfire Recovery Victoria, but Dr Rob Gordon. It was a fantastic webinar and quite timely, given that it was discussing communities in recovery and particularly a strong focus on mental health. So it was held by Bushfire Recovery Victoria, and it covered councillors across Alpine, Towong and East Gippsland. And the session covered understanding the social processes of recovery from disaster, engaging with the community who are in a state of high emotion post-disaster, and working with communities and councils to prepare for the 6-month low post-disaster. So it was a really important webinar, and I got a lot out of it, and you may have noticed that I did actually circulate the presentation from Dr Rob Gordon, and I think it'd be a worthwhile report for all councillors to have a read of, but also keep handy as a reference. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Rottino. And I might add that his wealth of knowledge and experience goes all the way back to actually Ash Wednesday. So he has covered off on recovery and mentoring from all of those disasters since way back in Ash Wednesday. So a very experienced person, and it was a very good session. So I was privy to a visit from a couple of gentlemen from Melbourne, and on Friday afternoon at the Bairnsdale Gallery with Councillor Rottino, and it's the idea that these gentlemen have, and it's Councillor Rottino was it Rob, not Gary Morgan? Sorry, thank you for that. Yes, so Gary Morgan was one of these, wishing to utilise the rolling stock, the aged and vintage rolling stock, which they will call a royal train, and these carriages are magnificent to view them when they show them on screen, where royalty have actually travelled the regions on their visits to Australia over many, many years, and they are hoping to put this train together and have visits to Bairnsdale, and then alight from the train after they've been pampered on their journey, their 4 to 4.5 hour journey from Melbourne, and then alight and see the highlights of our area and also stay for a couple of nights in accommodation in various points in East Gippsland. So if that does get off the ground, it'll be a wonderful, wonderful thing to be involved in for our region. And getting back to Councillor Ellis, who sort of stole the show, but our Queen's Birthday honours list for our locals, and so I also would like to acknowledge and congratulate the following community members who were awarded an Order of Australia Medal in the Queen's Birthday honours list for 2020. And as Councillor Ellis spoke, we have Mrs Frances Harrison for her service to Indigenous visual art and East Gippsland community. The next person who was not mentioned by Councillor Ellis, but I know this gentleman well. He is a farmer out in my area, Mr Craig Bush. Congratulations, Craig, for his service to conservation and the East Gippsland community. And I might add, his work is not only in the conservation. He's the organiser of our beef conference, which unfortunately this year will not be happening, but he has been the driving force behind that and many other things in our region. So congratulations, Craig. Then Ms Catherine Larkins for her service to Indigenous visual art and East Gippsland community, and Mr Lenny Hayes for his service to Indigenous visual art and the East Gippsland community. So and we also had Mr Russell Pardue, who received an Australian Fire Service Medal for his services to the East Gippsland community. So I would just say again, congratulations on being recognised in such a significant way for contribution to our East Gippsland communities, and thank you all for your ongoing commitment to our community. So thank you very much. So that's my report for the last couple of weeks. So that just moves us on to our officer reports, and 5.1 is our 5.1.1 is our proposed locality boundary amendment for Paynesville and Eagle Point. So I think I'll pass this to Mr Cannizzaro, please. Is Kylie online? Or?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have Liz Collins on the line.
Ms Collins.
So, speak to this item.
Sorry about that. There are so many faces up on the screen, and there you are. I have spotted you. So Ms Collins, would you like to speak to this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. This report today seeks council's endorsement to amend the Paynesville and Eagle Point locality boundary. As part of the Eagle Point structure plan consultation, there were a number of submissions received requesting that council consider amending the locality boundary between Paynesville and Eagle Point. Council at the 6th of August council meeting in 2009 adopted the recommendation that council approve the recommendation of officers to commence the consultation process as part of the proposed boundary locality amendment. The processes that council is required to undertake have happened, and that included public consultation and a survey of the impacted properties. And the next step in the process is for the submission to be lodged with the Office of Geographic Place Names. As part of that process, there's a requirement for council to endorse the proposal. So this report is seeking council's endorsement, and there are two recommendations there for council's consideration today. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So councillors, do you have any questions for Ms Collins?
Makes sense.
Councillor Buckley.
He seems to have disappeared. If there's no questions, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. So Councillor Peltz has moved it. Councillor Rotino has seconded it. Do you wish to speak to this? Because this has been something in the pipeline for a fair while. And you being one of our longer serving councillors.
It has been, and it's really good to see this kind of issue being resolved. It's been a contentious area for quite some time, and the officers are really adamant to be able to keep the two townships separated. So I think this boundary alignment actually sort of organises this structurally, and I think the officers have done a good job. I'm pleased to see, you know, the people talking to it, and I thank everyone who's contributed and written in and had some kind of say with regards to their comments. I think that's good, and I guess the next step, it goes off to the surveying area, and then I'm not sure what comes when it comes back, but at least this step's been progressed a bit further. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Rotino.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think a lot of the Eagle Point community have always felt they've been shadowed or overshadowed by the Paynesville being the major town, and you know, Eagle Point in its own right has been a precinct for a long time, and I think this is a significant step forward, and I just commend the officers for the work that's gone into this. Thanks.
So, councillors, I'll ask, does anyone wish to speak against it? No. Anyone else like to speak? Okay. Well, that leaves us with the vote. So I would suggest all those in favour, councillors, please raise your hands. Thank you. That's a unanimous decision. So that gives us, moves us to item 5.1.2, which is our Mallacoota kindergarten. Now this is authored by Ms Jodie Pitkin and is also endorsed by our CEO Anthony Basford. So Ms Pitkin, would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good afternoon, councillors. As you're aware, on the 27th of February 2020, the Minister for Education announced the allocation of up to $2.5 million for the establishment of a 66-place kindergarten facility for the Mallacoota community. You will also be aware that to date, council officers have been involved in the consultation process regarding the appropriate site for the new kindergarten as a stakeholder and have provided advice to project leaders and other community stakeholders. The current kindergarten is operated from a council-owned building at Greer Street, which is nearing the end of its life. The program is cluster managed by the YMCA and is licensed to deliver early education services to 25 children. It is possible to build a new facility on this site. However, this would require significant investigation and would result in significant challenges, as well as children accessing the program in 2021 having to relocate at some stage during the year while building works take place, and the unavailability of an integrated 15-hour 3-year-old program for the 2021 year. The Department of Education have endorsed the Mallacoota P12 site as an alternate option for building the new preschool that would ensure the establishment of a 66-place program for the start of the 2021 year, enable the delivery of a 15-hour 3- and 4-year-old program for the 2021 year, and ensure that the children of 2021 and beyond were able to plan to be educated in the same location for their kindergarten year. There have been concerns expressed by members of the community in relation to the consultation and the manner that it has been carried out. This has unfortunately resulted in the forming of several factions within the community, creating some issues in terms of moving the project forward. As an essential stakeholder, council is encouraged to form a position in relation to the establishment of the kindergarten, and officers have recommended that this be the establishment of the kindergarten on the Mallacoota P12 site. Councillors, I take the report as read and am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms Pitkin. Questions, councillors?
I'm happy to move it, Mayor, if required.
Right, thank you. There's no questions at this stage, so that's certainly, we have a mover in Councillor Reeves and a seconder in Councillor O'Connell. So, Councillor Reeves, I'm sure you would like to speak to this.
Oh, look, it's fantastic.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Marianne, did I overstep?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Sorry, did you just come in with a late question, have you? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I did have a question, Mr. Mayor. I was curious as to why the hold-up is on being able to build back on that site. And obviously, I would be thinking it's an asbestos issue. Would that be the issue behind the basis of why the kindergarten can't be rebuilt on its site that it was previously on? Jodie?
Sorry, Councillor Palsy, you're referring to the Greer Street site, so you're asking...
Yes. Yep.
So it can be rebuilt on that site. However, there are a couple of overlays and issues that would make that a longer process that don't apply to the Mallacoota P12 site.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would make the building process a much longer one, and mean that as it is, the timeframes are already really short, so it would make the building process a much longer one, and would result in the new preschool not being ready for the beginning of the 2021 year.
Okay. And the parents, are they all in support of the new location? Because I just sort of would like to think that it sort of fits in better with picking up other kids from school, and that it's more appropriate and centralised.
There is certainly some parents that are in support of the new location, and some parents that are in support of staying at the same site. It's a very defined, there are two very distinct views. The department has carried out a public consultation process, but and I was hoping to have some of that information, the results of that, available for councillors today, but whilst the consultation process is finished, the results have not yet been published.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Councillor Peltzer. Now, unfortunately, we had already advised of a mover and a seconder, so that's still in play. So, Councillor Reeves, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, the development of a kindergarten should be something that really unites the community. And after the events that Mallacoota has been through, we really need some good news and things that glue the community together. And if there have been some issues around consultational perceptions, we hope that the Department of Education can make good those consultations and give the whole community a sense that they're listened to and brought along on the journey to the site that we believe is the right site. I know that Councillor O'Connell is supporting this motion as well, and we remember the deliberations in the same sort of matter up at Omeo, Councillor O'Connell. And the final landing of that site at Omeo Primary School has, for all intents and purposes, been nothing but a great success. And we know the importance of smoothing the way for transitions, and the notion of, in small communities, having an education precinct, I think, is really, really important. There's also, in small communities, that whole notion of having the family, the whole community gathered together, and it's almost that vertical structuring of schools so that kids from K to 12 can see each other on the same grounds and have that support structure. It makes sense to me, it makes sense to us, and I think it makes sense to the Department of Education, especially the economies of scale, because what we haven't mentioned but is in the report is that we can get a much better bang for our buck on the site at the Peter 12 College than at the Greer Street site because of the issues of bushfire overlays. So, councillors, I hope you support this. It is a great opportunity for Mallacoota. It's another one of those decisions 6 months after an event. It's a timely moment to actually look positively for 2021 and to have those little kids in a brand new building on site.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor O'Connell.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Reeves. I wholeheartedly support what you've just said. As you said, Omeo Primary School has had the benefit of having its early childhood centre on its grounds for the last 18 months, and the benefits are there, and it's a very exciting time for Mallacoota given what they've gone through to have that integration of education, the transition for kindergarten kids going into prep, and the familiarisation that they'll have of the school grounds already. It's a win-win situation, and great that the kids will be able to start the new year in 2021. So I encourage you all to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against this? No, good. So any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Rotino.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to endorse the first two councillors that spoke in relation to this issue, but just picking up on Councillor Reeves and talking about the family concept, I think it's really, really important as well. And certainly any feedback that I've had in relation to that is that how important for the younger kids to see how they can transition into the other stages of school. I think it's a really important thing to have it all on the one precinct.
Thank you, Councillor Rotino. And if I may also add that I've had a chance to meet with James Molino MP, our Minister for Education, and that is actually, as Councillor Reeves described, it is their policy that all new builds will incorporate early learning with the primary schools. So for all those reasons that you've just discussed. So, councillors, I put this to the vote. All those in favour? Good, thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So moving on, now we have item 5.1.3, which is a planning permit application 319-2019-P 31 Boyd Court in Eagle Point. It's a multi-lot subdivision. Now, this will be Ms Pitkin will speak to this and probably Ms Reynolds, but we also have a request to speak, and Mr Canizaro will read this out. Could I just get some advice, please? Would we first hear from the officers and then do this? So you will read first. Thank you very much for that advice.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. I have before me a request to speak on agenda item 5.1.3 from a Mr Michael Sadler of Bairnsdale. I'll read the statement now.
Thank you.
It's regarding planning permit application 319/2019/P, multi-lot subdivision, stage 31 Boyd Court at Eagle Point. In considering the officer's recommendation today, we'd like the councillors to revisit the following extract provided by the Planning Department for the council meeting agenda from the 17th of December 2019. In Victoria, for an intended change of policy to have a significant influence on a planning application, a formal planning scheme amendment seeking to implement that change must be on exhibition in order for a council to give it statutory weight. In this case, the planning scheme amendment is not on exhibition, and as such, the structure plan has no statutory weight in consideration of this proposal. Open brackets at this present time, close brackets, and a reference to page 86, and I'm assuming that's as related to the meeting agenda. It therefore makes little sense for the officer's report to be relying so heavily on a document that can be given no statutory weight. It is our position that the proposal is entirely consistent with the East Gippsland planning scheme, which specifies that the minimum lot size for land in this zone is 2,000 square metres. The ability to create lots of 2,000 square metres in the LDRZ, where sewer is available, was implemented by the Minister for Planning through VC 100 in July 2013 to facilitate development that makes the best use of existing infrastructure. This change, initiated by the state government's reformed zones for Victoria package, saw the Minister for Planning challenge responsible authorities to act responsibly, underlined, managing residential land as a finite resource and encouraging urban consolidation. The proposal reflects landscape character objectives with respect to the retention of vegetation, with the proposed road alignment carefully designed to maximise the retention of trees. We say the proposal has merit having regard for the varied character of the surrounding properties, in particular in light of relatively recent approvals to the immediate east of the subject land, where vacant lots ranging in area from 2,053 square metres to 2,929 square metres have been approved for the extension of Moorcroft Rise. The officer's report fails to acknowledge these recent approvals, with figure 5 of the report omitting reference to these smaller lots and issued within the approvals within recent times, including a lot of only 2,301 square metres at 7 Regatta Place. We also disagree with the officer's statement that the proposal will present an impediment to future development in accordance with the strategic vision for Eagle Point. It is evident from our proposed subdivision plan that is not the case. And there are 3 bullet points that follow. Bullet point 1, the connector road to the west will be delivered. Bullet point 2, pedestrian connectivity can be facilitated. And bullet point 3, the pocket park towards Boyd Court will be achieved. We acknowledge the proposed layout slightly adjusts the point where the new road leaves the site along the western boundary, but believe this is a minor variation that has no impact on the outcome. The alignment we propose reflects the conditions on the ground and not just where a Melbourne-based planner has drawn a line following a desktop analysis. We say this road alignment will provide for more appropriate development of adjoining land, avoiding the wastefulness of a one-sided road. This is entirely consistent with Council's value statement that claims we will actively seek better and more cost-effective ways to achieve the best outcomes for East Gippsland. We reject the officer's statements that the proposal will deliver an outcome inconsistent with the character of the area. Unlike other residential zones, neighbourhood character is not an issue for consideration in the LDRZ. Our clients are long-term residents of the area with their love of the site evident from the manicured presentation of the site, including substantial plantings undertaken across the property. It is also worth noting that 3 objections received have not come from neighbouring properties in Boyd Court or Lake Victoria Road. On behalf of our clients, I would implore you to consider the merits of the proposal in determining this matter today. Signed, Michael Sadler, 23rd of June 2020. Thank you.
Thank you for reading that out, Mr Cannizzaro. So, Ms Pitkin, would you like to introduce Ms Reynolds to go through this summary, please?
Sure, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've asked Nicole Reynolds, as the Acting Manager of Planning, to attend the meeting today and speak to this report. Nicole, I can see your face. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council, members of the ELT. Thank you for the opportunity to present this Council report. The Council report documents planning permit application 319 2019 P for Peter. The application is seeking approval for a 17-lot subdivision to be completed in stages. The application was lodged with Council in October 2019 and has been subject to public notice provisions and has attracted 3 objections. The officer recommendation before Council is to seek resolution to the issue of a notice of refusal to grant a permit on 3 grounds. The subject land is zoned for low-density residential purposes and is identified in current local strategy as being deemed suitable for low-density development. Part of the application requirements contained in relation to the low-density residential zone require that any proposal demonstrate how any subdivision relates to the existing or likely use of development of the adjoining and nearby land. Decision guidelines contained within the zone provisions refer specifically to the municipal strategic statement. Approval of any application to subdivide land at clause 6502 of the planning scheme requires the responsible authority to consider as appropriate the subdivision pattern having regard to physical characteristics of the land, including existing vegetation. I refer also to the Planning Environment Act at section 60, subsection 1, subsection G, in that it refers to matters that a responsible authority must take into account when making decisions. This clause specifically refers to any other strategic plan, policy statement, code or guidelines which have been adopted by a minister, government department, public authority or municipal council. The three grounds as proposed relate to inconsistency with current local planning policy as contained within the Municipal Strategic Statement, namely relating to the environmental and landscape values, strategies relating to the built environment, and specifically strategies and actions relating to the township and settlement area of Eagle Point. More specifically...
Excuse me, Ms Reynolds, do you mind if I just interrupt you for a moment, please?
Sure.
Just as was announced at the beginning of the meeting, Ms Weigel declared a conflict of interest. I would just like to let the councillors on live stream and also those members of the public that may be tuning in that Ms Weigel has left the chamber. Thank you. You may continue. Sorry about that.
Thank you. More specifically, the current local planning policy relating to Eagle Point is contained within the East Gippsland Planning Scheme. The Municipal Strategic Statement is an essential part of any assessment with respect to any planning permit application. The current Municipal Strategic Statement sets out the vision and the objectives that guide decision making for Eagle Point. The overall current objective relating to Eagle Point seeks to enhance the character and setting of Eagle Point. Current strategies specifically seek to ensure that the development of Eagle Point occurs generally in accordance with the Eagle Point strategy plan, that the development retains the low intensity character of development and contain building height, that development contains low density residential development within existing zones, and that development provides for a comprehensive pathway networks within the town and linking to open space areas. That development ensures that residential development along the Bairnsdale-Paynesville Road includes a vegetated buffer adjacent to the road. Strategies specifically relating to the built environment forming part of the current local provisions seek to ensure that all development is designed in keeping with landscape and town character. So with respect to these current policies that are currently in the planning scheme, we say the proposed lot sizes and the pattern of subdivision does not retain the existing low intensity character of the area, in that the proposed lots are smaller in area than those which are predominantly found within the precinct. The scheme of subdivision provides no contribution to providing for a vegetated buffer along the Bairnsdale-Paynesville Road and does not provide appropriate pedestrian linkages to the east. The pattern of subdivision as proposed seeks to create a minimum lot size in a way that is inconsistent with the prevailing and existing neighbourhood character of the area. In addition, in August 2019, Council adopted the Eagle Point Structure Plan as a key strategy designed specifically to manage change in Eagle Point for the long term. It recognises change within the town and the need to have regard for existing character. The structure plan identifies areas where change will be supported within the town with incremental development and provides for strategies and preconditions as to how the change is to be implemented. The subject land is identified as a key strategic site which is able to accommodate growth and change. The section of the structure plan relating to the town boundary seeks to recognise the landscape values of the rural amenity north of Paynesville Road by requiring subdivisions to maintain a minimum width and lot size as defined by figure 26, which nominates a 4,000 square metre minimum for the subject land. Key considerations for managing change and character relate to the influence of direct frontage and lot size along Paynesville Road interface in keeping with the existing large lot character. The structure plan in developing character talks to newer subdivisions which display more urban qualities in terms of lot sizes and streetscapes, which is inconsistent with the preferred informal character of the township. Strategies relating to residential character specifically seek for new subdivisions to respect the attributes of the township, such as informal streetscapes, lot sizes, and the retention of existing vegetation. Objectives and strategies relating to the movement network seek specifically to require developers to construct new roads and pedestrian path connections within and adjacent to new development within zoned residential land to ensure that neighbourhoods are appropriately connected and accessible. Objectives and strategies relating to the open space network seek to provide for a network of scattered, informal open space to provide for passive and recreation open space. The proposed implementation of the structure plan proposes that the site be included in an area for a schedule to the low density residential zone, which will be nominating minimum lot sizes. In summary, in response to the adopted structure plan, the proposal is inconsistent as follows. The proposed lot sizes are not 4,000 square metres. The proposed road alignment, the retention of the separate driveway, and the inclusion of the private passive open space adjacent to Boyd Court is inconsistent. The layout fails to provide for pedestrian connection to the east. The subdivision fails to provide for a vegetated buffer to the Painesville Road. For these reasons, as documented in the council report and outlined in summary form here, it is respectfully requested that council consider the planning arguments provided and resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a planning permit based on the 3 grounds as written.
Thank you, Ms Reynolds. Would councillors have questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Buckley.
What do we mean by in these referrals that with a conditional approval given, and the Vic Roads one is the same and the gas one is the same? What's that conditional business? What's that all about? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Buckley. The attached documents include referral responses which provide conditional approval for the subdivision. So the correspondence you're referring to refers to the Vic Roads conditions.
Can I have a follow-up to that, Mr Mayor, please?
Yes, I'll go Councillor Peltz first and then you, Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. May I just ask, given the fact that this subdivision doesn't have anything to do with connecting to the Vic Roads other than the fact that the most south blocks back onto the Painesville Road, as I can see, and there is a decent tree line along there, it would appear, but the bottom line for me is they don't actually have a exit spot to a Vic Roads road, so I'm questioning what the relevance is there, please.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz, for your question. You're right. The proposed subdivision proposes a layout with the inclusion of a new road with no direct access to Painesville Road. The Vic Roads referral response, in fact, would require a legal agreement to ensure that no direct access is provided to Painesville Road.
No worries, thank you for that. I had a further question, but I wondered whether Ben was wanting to finish his own question from previous.
Yeah, and there was also East Gippsland Water. That was the only other conditional thing I was wondering about. So anyway, that's been explained. I've got a little bit more to say, speaking against the recommendation a bit later on. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
So, Councillor Reeves, you'd asked to have a question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms Reynolds. Councillors, my question relates to the matter of the statutory weight of the structure plan, as alluded to by Mr Sadler in his commentary earlier on in this particular item. Given that the report pays some consideration to the lot size, which is referred to in the structure plan, there's clearly a little bit of a tension between Mr Sadler's interpretation of the statutory weight and our interpretation of the statutory weight. Ms Reynolds, can you just perhaps guide us a little bit there and help us along understanding where is the correct landing point there? So I'll quote Mr Sadler, his contention that the strategy or structure plan has no statutory weight.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves, for the answer to your question. Our position is that we agree that the structure plan is still subject to a planning scheme amendment.
Yes.
That would specifically aim to implement the structure plan into provisions to be contained within the East Gippsland planning scheme.
Yes.
It would have the impact of updating the municipal strategic statement and make reference to zonings, schedules as documented in the implementation plan of the Eagle Point of the structure plan itself. I took you as part of my initial introduction comments to the Act, the Planning and Environment Act, and specifically the section in relation to section 60, which is the matters which a responsible authority must take into account when making decisions. And the answer in that subsection, Councillor Reeves and others, with respect, referred to us being required to make reference and decisions which are must take into account any other strategic plan policy statement. And as you might recall, my final words were in and around as adopted by the Minister, Government Department, Public Authority and Municipal Council. We say, in response to your question, is that the Eagle Point Structure Plan has been adopted by the responsible authority as a strategic plan which has relevance to the case at hand. In part of my answer and introduction statement also, I was able to highlight the existing local planning policy that is currently contained within the local planning provisions. And it too refers to the character and statements in around Eagle Point. So with reference to the statutory weight, we say that it has weight with respect to section 60 of the Planning and Environment Act.
Thank you, Ms Reynolds. That's great clarification, and thank you for reminding me of your comments.
Councillor Peltz, you've got another question?
Yeah, I have another question, please. Yep. Ms Reynolds, how long has this application been been in the process for? I'll be curious to know what time span.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. I understand the application was lodged in October 2019.
Okay.
So can I just have a clarification then that the statutory plan that Mark was alluding to or was wanting further information on was it finalised or was it pushed through more quickly to alleviate these kinds of developments happening?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Peltz. The preparation of the Eagle Point Structure Plan was a project that was commenced some years ago with reference to updating the municipal strategic statement with relation to Eagle Point. It went through extensive community consultation and the plan was ultimately adopted by Council in August 2019. And it is a document that is extensive in far as its address and consideration with respect to the future growth of Eagle Point. So it's an update in relation to strategies in and around Eagle Point. Specifically, as part of its purpose, it is about managing change and managing incremental change for Eagle Point. Essentially, the consultation process was extensive and was adopted ultimately by Council in August 2019.
It just seems to me that all of a sudden there seems to be interest in subdividing and developing this particular area, and you know, not long ago we had another subdivision not unsimilar to this one that was actually one of Miss Weigel's neighbours, and you know, all of a sudden there seems to be a lot of interest in making you know, people, I guess they're retirees, wanting to subdivide and get a bit of cash flow. And you know, I sort of see, you know, some areas have already been done which aren't far away, and they look consistent with what's happening here in this block. And it's really difficult because it is a rural living zone, and I'm sort of looking at this very big block right in the middle that I'm sort of thinking, well, you know, I would be wanting to subdivide this down to something smaller too. And, you know, it's not an unreasonable request. What's your point of order, Mark?
Well, that's for the Mayor to ask, I think, Councillor Pills.
Yes, well, Councillor Reeves, your point of order regarding...
Is this a question or an item of debate from Councillor Peltz? I'm not disputing what Councillor Peltz is saying is relevant, but is it a question or is this debate?
Yeah, Councillor
All right,
Peltz,
I'll revoke it and I'll take it to the debate then.
just, so you're not wishing to ask your question now? Councillor Peltz?
No.
Okay,
no,
thank you.
Thank you.
So we have any more questions for Ms Reynolds? Yeah, Councillor Toohey has Ms Reynolds.
Hi, Nicole. Can you just tell me what the minimum allotment size is in this zoned property, which is rural living zone?
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. The current zone is low density residential zone.
Yep.
The zone currently allows application in the circumstances where reticulated sewer can be provided to allow for the property in question to be subdivided using 2,000 square metres allotments as the minimum.
So if I can further ask then, Nicole, is sewerage being proposed for this subdivision?
I'm able to confirm that East Gippsland Water has confirmed the ability for the land to be provided with reticulated sewer.
So would it be fair for me, as one of the people making a decision here, that I have to balance up what is allowable as far as the regulations go and what our the plan for the local area there, we have to balance those two because they would appear to be at odds at present.
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Yes, the decision is about balancing essentially what the zone allows and promotes with the ability to provide reticulated sewer. The argument being advanced at officer level is that the current local planning provisions relating to Eagle Point talk and speak to the need to preserve and enhance local character. And in this case, the further strategic work that has been undertaken with relation to the preparation of the Eagle Point structure plan consolidates the strategic work in relation to neighbourhood character and the future growth potential of Eagle Point. The land is able to be subdivided. The land is identified as performing a key site and strategic significance for Eagle Point. Low-density residential development is appropriate for the site. It is the form of the proposed subdivision wherein the position between the proponent and the officer's summation differ.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask, Mr Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Peltz.
Yep, sorry to be dragging on. The previous subdivisions that have been granted, one of them is neighbouring down the hill, and it states that it's a very, the subdivision is actually a very good use of the land. It's an appropriate use of the land. And I'm curious as to how long ago that subdivision was granted and as to what the difference is now as to why it wouldn't be granted. And I'm also curious as to just to know that if this was to be granted, they would be looking at having mains water, mains sewerage, and any other mains that they're needing. Would it be firefighting or something to that effect? That's it, Nicole.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Peltz. I'll answer the last part first. So the proposed subdivision is dependent upon the extension of water, reticulated water and reticulated sewer, and all services associated with power, water, telecommunications, and road network. The first part of your question referred to some recent planning permits which have been issued, which have allowed for the creation of lots using the 2,000 square metres. The first example you used was to the east, which is essentially an allotment which has had a permit issued which extends Moorcroft Rise in a westerly direction. These lots are created using the 2,000 square metres, and with this permit was issued in May 2018. The other example used by the proponent this afternoon is the creation of a new road called Regatta Rise, which is a subdivision that takes access from Lake Victoria Road. That particular planning permit was issued in November 2016. It created a 5-lot subdivision with 3 of the lots at a greater than 4,000, but 2 of the lots were less than 4,000, in between 2,000 and 3,900. So confirming that there have been planning permits issued with respect to allowing for lots to be created at 2,000 square metres. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you, Ms Reynolds. Now, Councillor Toohey also has another question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nicole, just your comments then in regards to Regatta Place. There is only the 5-lot subdivision there, as I seeing the picture on the information here. There is 4 lots, the minimum of which is 4,000 square metres, and 1 which doesn't have a figure on it, which clearly is a 2,000 odd square metre. So is the information that we've been given here correct?
Yes. So the plan of subdivision. So what you have in front of you is the plan. One of the lots is at 3,981. So there was an adjustment between the proposed plan and the final plan of subdivision. So the lot, the rectangular lot, which is adjacent to Lake Victoria Road, is 2,288 square metres, and one of the lots is approximately 3,981 metres. So 2 of the lots are less than 4,000, with the other 3 lots being greater than 4,000 square metres. We have one at 4,300 approximately, one at 4,400 approximately, and one at 5,200 square metres.
And I have another question, if I may, just in regards to the preferred alignment.
Microphone, please, Colin.
Sorry, thought
There
I
we are.
switched it
Gotcha.
on. Nicole, I have a further question just in regards to the 33,000 odd square metre allotment to the west of the proposed subdivision. Council's preferred positioning of a road through the proposed area has that road running out to Lake Victoria Road on the southern side of that 33,000 square metre allotment. Now, how would that allotment then be further subdivided when the time comes? And sorry, Nicole, if I could put that into context, what I'm looking at is, as the proposal is, it shows that the road they're proposing runs somewhat through the middle of that allotment, which would then mean that there could be blocks either side of that road.
Correct. So the structure plan with respect to the proposed alignment of the road does take the southern boundary. It is in and around respecting existing location of an existing dwelling on that land. Essentially, the placement of the road has been to have regard for retention of existing dwelling.
So, there's no other consideration being looked at there in regards to that particular block, is that right?
Oh, there were certainly about promoting the east-west connection. Essentially, how that allotment that fronts Lake Victoria Road could be further subdivided has not been considered in more detail than that.
Great. Thanks, Nicole.
My Mr Mayor, I've got another question.
Yes,
It's a
Councillor
follow-up
Peltz.
from. It's a follow-up from Councillor Tui's, now that he's alluded it. But I'm looking at lots 12 and 13 in this subdivision, and it looks like there's an actual road proposed to the Paynesville Road, and wondering whether that's been alerted to them that that's not a possibility, because Vic Roads has actually stated that they don't actually want to have another access road from coming into their carriageway. So just curious about what would be, if this was to be granted, what that proposal would be for that particular bit there, to be a roundabout and not have that road extension to it.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. My understanding is that the premise of the application is that 10-metre width would not provide vehicle or road connection, that it would provide pedestrian connection to the Paynesville Road only.
Oh, well, thank you, Ms Reynolds. Is there any more questions from councillors? Are you speaking, Councillor Peltz?
Yeah, did we happen to get an alternative recommendation for this one?
Ms Pitkin, could you answer that question, please?
So, Councillor Pals, you will recall that this morning I advised that our ability to prepare an alternative recommendation with appropriate conditions was limited, and that we were unable to do that by today. So if councillors were choosing, if councillors want to move a deferral, they can do so. However, we were not able to prepare an alternate with appropriate conditions in time.
Thank you for that.
Mr Mayor, if I may.
You've got a question, Councillor Ellis?
Yeah, seeing Ms Pilkin there, I just suddenly realised that I've been thinking about the current conversations been toing and throwing across the chamber. And I feel as if I've been here with this conversation before. Can Ms Pilkin advise us, has there been an outcome of the Solly matter at VCAT because it was the same size sort, or similar sort of project to this one, and that was taken to VCAT after council, I think, approved it. I can't recall the actual outcome, but can you bring us up to date on that, please?
The planning application, thank you, Councillor Ellis, for your question. The planning application you refer to is land at 5 Lake Victoria Road. It was an application that was considered by council, and a notice of refusal to grant a permit was the decision of council, and it's still awaiting. It has been listed to be, there's an appeal been lodged, and it's been listed for a VCAT hearing.
Right,
the appeal has been listed to be heard on the 20th of August.
Gee, that's a long draw-out process, isn't it? Okay, was Mr. Sadler? Sadler was the man for that proponent as well, wasn't he?
Was too, Dick. Yep. Yep.
I'm not sure, Councillor Ellis. I'm sorry, I do not have that detail at my fingertip.
I recall that being the case, Dick. Yep. Sorry, Mayor, my might have been off.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves.
To move the motion to get things along.
Councillor Tui wished to move a motion. So, Councillor Tui.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move a motion that we defer making a decision on this until we have all the relevant information that we have asked for, which has some of which has been addressed today. But I don't feel that I have nor have been given the appropriate information to make an appropriate decision today. So I would...
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Oh, sorry, Mr. CEO.
Yes, my apologies for the interruption, but I believe that a councillor has asked that the motion be put, and that occurred prior.
I have asked the motion be put.
Moving the motion by Councillor Tui. So the motion does need to be put. It needs to be confirmed whether that can be done or not. So that needs to happen first, and then Councillor Tui's motion can be considered if the other one fails.
All right. So I actually missed hearing you speak, Councillor Reeves. So my apologies for that.
No, that's okay. It's a challenging circumstance we're in, but no, I will move it to get this show on the road.
All right. Do we have a seconder? It would appear that we don't have a seconder.
There you go. Motion's lost.
So that would mean that this has lapsed, and now we have Councillor Tui's to this deferral for this planning permit at this stage. So, Councillor Tui, would you like to speak again, so as we have it in the minutes? I'm sorry for missing Councillor Reeves's first comment.
That's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I just suggested a moment ago, I don't believe that I have all the information, all the relevant information that I need to make a proper decision on behalf of members of our community. So that's the reason why I would like to defer it until we have full information. Thank you.
All right, and I have I see you waving, Councillor Peltz, but Councillor Rotino has indicated that he wishes to second this motion. So so it's seconded by Councillor Rotino, and would you've virtually spoken to it as to your reasoning, but you may speak again.
Mayor, and I'm happy to proceed with that.
And Councillor Rotino, would you wish to add anything?
Just that, yeah, I would like the other information that's been referred to today, so I can make an informed decision on behalf of the community. Thanks.
Good. Anybody else wish to speak for or against?
Mr. Mayor.
I'll speak against it. Mayor.
Can I just speak, Mr. Mayor, as well?
Yeah, Councillor Ellis, I believe you were just a little ahead of Councillor Reeves, yes.
Okay. Look, I don't. Seeing we've got to this point where we want to defer, I'm not, uncomfortable with that. But I am uncomfortable with it. The matter gets drawn out once again.
Correct.
And that we don't. So I would like to see this motion have a set date. So let's say the 7th of July is the next ordinary meeting, or another date that's not too far in the distance. I would hate to see this get drawn out for another few months, and then looking at the backlog that's going on at VCAT, have the proponent be dragged off and lost into the future. So, can I ask if Councillor Tui's agreeable that we set a date in his motion? Perhaps say the 7th of, if it's okay, if it's achievable. I want something achievable too, of course.
Yes, we could have an adjustment to his amendment.
So, Councillor Ellis, I'm happy with that. If it can be achieved, that we have the information prior to our next regular council meeting, defer until then, which is the 7th of July, as I understand.
Thank you, Councillor Tui. Now, Councillor Reeves, you wish to speak against?
Yeah, councillors, I'm disappointed that we've come to this point for a number of reasons. Look, planning matters are challenging, and we've been elected to make decisions, not to defer matters. And with all your best intentions to get more information, I don't actually know what more information you're requesting to be able to make a decision. The report is comprehensive, and the report lays out all that is required at the moment. And if you think you're doing the proponent a favour by deferring it, I believe, I agree with Councillor Ellis, that you're not, because you're actually delaying a decision of that person. If we make a decision to actually refuse the application, they can get on with an appeal and the whole process continued. So you're not actually helping them at all, even if you are somebody in the chamber who is a proponent of development and to get things going. Councillors, as I said, our job is to make a decision. The local character is important in the structure plan, and the structure plan, as the officer has said, Ms Reynolds, that the structure plan has statutory weight. We can make a decision based on the structure plan, despite what the proponents' council has said. Look, it is the scale of the development that's at odds with me, and I am in agreement that this is a place and an area that needs to be developed. There's no doubt about it. But to move forward, you need to make a decision, and to defer it for another 2 weeks, and then to have the proponent hanging on, waiting for another deferral, and then it's going to be next year, even whatever the decision is made. If they take it, they appeal a decision, it'll be next year. So, councillors, don't defer it. Refuse this motion. Let's get back to the original motion. Let's get on with the recommendation and allow things to proceed. Councillors, especially the councillors who have supported a deferral, you're the ones who have also been proponents of getting on with business in council, and you just stymied it and slowed it down. So come on, councillors, we don't need to defer it. Make a decision and get on with things.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Now, Councillor Tui's asked for his right of reply, so if you like, Councillor Tui.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and with the greatest respect to you, Mark, I don't believe that as a councillor, one of the 9 people that our community has entrusted to make good decisions on their behalf, I don't believe that I was given all the information in regards to this application that I should have been, and that is the reason why I've asked for a deferment of 2 weeks to ensure that we have all the information given to us, which allows us to make the decisions that you yourself were just speaking of, which are important decisions on behalf of the community. But thanks for your input.
Thanks, Councillor Tui. Mr CEO, could I just please ask you for some clarification? In 2 weeks.
Point of order, Mayor.
Sorry, who's
Mayor,
speaking?
Point of order.
Did you want to speak?
So, point of order.
Yes.
So, what is the additional information that is required?
from our CEO or from councillors? Because
The councillors are requesting. It's in the,
From councillors.
well, could I just please have the opportunity? I was just asking our CEO is in this 2-week time frame to the next meeting. Obviously, things have to be put in place prior to that next meeting, and it's a possibility that 2 weeks is not enough time. Could you answer that, please, Mr. CEO?
Yes, I can, but I am conscious that you have a point of order on the table, Mr. Mayor. Briefly, if council laws are seeking additional information that can be circulated, say by email, then 2 weeks is probably a achievable date. If councillors are seeking to have a further briefing on the matter to unpack any additional information, we will not be in a position to be able to do that by the 7th.
All right, so councillors, you've heard the CEO's comments re just the 2 weeks, and so I guess because I'm holding Councillor Reeves's point of order, you should speak now, Councillor Reeves. As to your point, you certainly you wish the mover or seconder to speak to what it is they're looking for clarification on.
No, I think that's the case, Mayor, that at the moment I don't think the officers have a fair understanding, I certainly don't, of what it is that is required, that's more information above and beyond what I think is a comprehensive and rigorous analysis and report.
All right, well I can, yes, it's the mover, Councillor Toohey, is happy to answer.
So, Mark, just in regards to further information, it's apparent that there wasn't information in regards to the block of land to the east and the subdivision that was approved for that. However, it wasn't noted in the information that we were given in regards to making a decision for this particular application. So my question will certainly be why we didn't have that information, and potentially whether there is further subdivisions that fall outside of the category but decisions that have been made. It's a question I would like answered before I make a decision without appropriate, what I believe is appropriate information in regards to subdivisions in this area. That's in a nutshell, that is the information that I'm after. As I say, the subdivision to the right, 2 blocks over, I was not made aware of that, and my further question is there any others in the same situation?
All right, well, we have this Councillor Toohey's motion for deferral on the table, and it's seconded by Councillor Rotino, so I think with discussion done, that I should put this to the vote. So I'd ask councillors, all those in favour of Councillor Toohey's motion.
Mr Mayor, if I may ask before we put it to the vote, I want to clarify, are we putting this matter to be deferred? The motion is that the matter be deferred until the ordinary meeting of the 6th of July. I just want to make it to be very clear, because I've listened to the CEO saying
the 7th of July, Councillor Ellis, Tuesday the 7th of July at 1 p.m. here at in this chamber, and which is as our CEO has suggested, he thinks they would just have enough time to get this information to us and then get it back to be reintroduced at the July 7 meeting.
Okay.
So
all right, I wouldn't want to see it any further.
No, that's been covered off. So unfortunately, you've sort of partly interrupted the vote, but I'm happy to listen to what you had to say there. So we were at the stage of all those in favour, please. Against? Okay, so we have 7 for and Councillor Reeves has voted against. Thank you, councillors. And thank you, officers. That then leaves us to another planning permit application, which is 5.2.1. And this is a planning permit application 219/2019/P for removal of one native tree at 29A Bay Road, Eagle Point. Another one for yourself, Ms Pitkin and Ms Reynolds, thank you. And welcome back to Ms Weigel, she's just re-entered the chamber.
Mr Mayor, if I may.
Mr Cannizzaro.
We have a request to speak on that agenda item.
I am sorry, I have that in front of me. Yes, you may. You could read out this the letter, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a request to speak on an agenda item from Phil and Jeanette Burney of Eagle Point. And they wish to speak on item 5.2.1, planning permit application 219/2019/P for refusal, removal of one native tree at 29 uppercase A Bay Road, Eagle Point. If I may, Mr Mayor, the statement's quite lengthy, so it may go over 5 minutes. If you wish to stop me at 5, I will. If you want to extend that, that's fine too.
Look, I think I will allow this, Mr Cannizzaro, because we've actually spent a long time on the last item. So
thank you, Mr Mayor. Okay, so the statement is addressed to the Mayor, John White and councillors, dated 21st of June 2020. My wife and I relocated our young family to the East Gippsland Shire back in 1990. We bought a block and built a house in Paynesville, and from there raised 4 sons. We started a business in 1992, which we still run today, employing 3 full-time people as well as temporary labour from time to time. Over the journey, we have employed over 24 people in total, 4 of which now run their own business at present in the area. Jeanette studied locally to attain her diploma in children's services and had worked childcare for non-profit organisations for 20 years until our electrical business needed her to work full-time. We are active community members, always willing to volunteer our time and resources to community events, local clubs, schools, community groups, as well as in times of emergency such as floods and bushfires. Our involvement includes Apex and local football club, of which I had been a player, vice president, committee member, trainer and coach over the last 30 years. Our business supplied the labour as a donation to have the Bairnsdale District's first competition-grade lighting for night matches at the Paynesville football ground. We have also volunteered for many years setting up lighting and sound for arts shows, musical festivals and carols by candlelight. We relocated to Eagle Point in 2012, and with working closely with the Shire, we were able to have our block subdivided with an upgrade of the stormwater from Bay Road through to our property, with an understanding that we were able to eventually set a house on the north side of the new stormwater easement. We have now been able to achieve a planning and building permit to position the house to the block, as was our long-term goal. In 2019, we had noticed that a branch had come down from one of the 2 trees near our future house. We contacted a local qualified arborist to come and check the trees located close to our future home to ensure they were safe. On close inspection, he determined that there was a possibility of the tree falling and deemed the tree unsafe and should be removed. The second large tree, which is within a few metres of this tree, was seen as possessing no risk. We applied for a permit of removal of the tree, deemed it a risk to our safety, backed by the arborist report and documentation required for permit. The planning department officer had, on receiving the required information, asked for additional information. We contacted a number of qualified arborists, including the original arborist, to fulfil council requests for additional information on top of the 15-page report prepared by qualified arborists and previously submitted with our application. The response from the arborists was that they would not have the time before Christmas. From January 2020 onward, we attempted to engage an arborist, but they were understandably too busy due to the devastating fires that hit our region. Since this time, they've been unable to help due to ongoing workload from fires and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We attempted to engage an arborist from Melbourne, but the COVID-19 outbreak shut down travelling around the state, and we were still not able to get an arborist to fulfil the extra detailing required by the planning officer. We contacted the planning officer about how this process has caused us anxiety and stress, and we wish to resolve it in a fair manner which enables us to live with a feeling of well-being on our long-awaited move to this property. We mentioned that we confirm we are more than willing to offset the loss of this tree either on our property or on any other area deemed suitable by council. We had a few weeks ago asked the councillors and the mayor to review our application and requested him to assess the progress of the permit due to our concerns that this tree is having an impact on us and our feeling unsafe. In reply, the planning officer came on site for a peer review, and what the qualified arborist had forwarded in the original documentation and then forwarded to us via an email from General Manager, Place and Community on behalf of the planning officer that the tree was to stay. We have asked for the peer review report to look at, as well as the arborist report to say that the tree poses no problem to us, and we have been told that it will not be available until after the councillors have cited the report. This means we have no way of seeing the report until after there has been a conclusion of the councillor's decision. We have requested that the mayor and councillors are given full access to the full report before the meeting on the 23rd of June 2020. On the 22nd of June, we were directed to the agenda a livable region 5.2.1 and have looked through the executive summary document 846-1200 on pages 22. We note that the second paragraph is incorrect in saying our arborist declared the tree unsafe due to it being in poor health. The arborist stated in his 15-page report that the tree is healthy, but the structure of the tree is poor. We have asked to have a copy of the council's full report from the on-site inspection in order to confirm if the structure was considered safe or sound, and we are awaiting a reply on this. Read page 28. We strongly disagree that the tree has not been identified as a risk to life and property. Read page background. The information indicates that we had a choice to relocate our house to accommodate the tree, but as previously discussed, the available building envelope is very limited and we have no practical choice of building elsewhere on the land without restricting access to property. In relation to the neighbour objections, one neighbour objection states no major limbs have fallen from the tree. As this neighbour is located to the left of the photo below and has another neighbour's land between us, photo is referred to in this statement. In relation to the photo shows the other large native trees between her house and the tree we wish to remove. We believe her view of the tree is obstructed to the point where it would be unreasonable for her to say what has happened to this tree. In regards to concerns for the wildlife habitat, the other large gum tree is remaining, as well as further native trees we will continue to plant on our property. This will more than adequately continue to supply substantial habitat for the wildlife. It is relevant to note that neither objectors have any large trees on their properties. Re climate change, we will be providing more than adequate replacement trees to offset loss of any carbon storage or carbon emission of the tree. We had always intended to use any wood from the tree to make furniture which would retain the carbon, the wood of the tree. We have always been more than happy to ensure the impact of cutting one tree is offset in any way the council deems suitable. We note that on the agenda our planning submission is under the title of A Livable Region. This stressful process has been only to allow us to live in our home without concern for our safety. We respectfully ask if the Mayor and Council share the planning officer's view that the tree is more important than our health and safety. Yours sincerely, Jeanette and Phil Burney. Thank you.
Thank you for reading that, Mr. Cannizzaro. So then we now can move on to the discussion points, and I'll leave it with you, Ms. Pitkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got Nicole Reynolds here again to introduce the report and to answer most of your questions, but I'm happy to take them as well. Nicole?
Thank you, Ms Reynolds.
Thank you very much, councillors and members of the ELT. The planning application before you, number 2119-2019 P for Peter, seeks removal of one native tree at 29A Bay Road, Eagle Point. The planning application has been made to remove a single forest red gum native tree from the property. The officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a planning permit. The application is accompanied by an arborist report which provides a recommendation that the tree be removed, that pruning is not feasible and is deemed unsafe. Council's arborist assessment of the tree in question is that the tree is indigenous, it's remnant, has significant landscape quality, displays good health. A primary issue is that the tree was proposed to be removed to facilitate the development of a dwelling. A planning permit has now been issued to allow for the development of a dwelling. This planning permit was issued on the 16th of April 2020, and it included a requirement to submit amended plans. The plans specifically refer to setback of the dwelling, to the trunk of the tree, a dimensioned root protection zone, and conditions specifically about no more than 10% incursion by the dwelling in the nominated tree root zone, conditions about minor trimming being permitted, and a condition saying no vegetation to be removed. The officer's report is recommending refusal to grant a planning permit on 5 grounds. The grounds relate primarily to inconsistency with the planning policy framework, being the state planning policy framework with reference to clause 12, environmental and landscape values, clause 13, relating to environmental risk and amenity considerations, and neighbourhood character. The second ground refers specifically to our local planning policy framework, more specifically relating to environmental and landscape values. More particularly at 2112 in reference to local policy relating to Eagle Point, we have statements that specifically include aims to protect and enhance the natural environment within the Eagle Point settlement area. Specifically strategies including ensuring the retention of indigenous vegetation in all new developments. The fourth ground refers to inconsistency with the Eagle Point structure plan with respect to removal of remnant vegetation. More specifically, inconsistency with 5217, which is the state clause in relation to removal of vegetation. In summary, the fifth ground states that we are of the opinion that the tree is indigenous, is remnant and is worthy of protection. The subject land is Zone General Residential Zone. It's included in a land subject to inundation, and the land is approximately 4,900 square metres in area. The removal of the tree has been subject to public notification and has attracted 2 objections. Essentially, these objections relate to the tree providing habitat for local wildlife, that the tree has not had significant limbs fall, and raising some issues in around the placement of fill. For the reasons documented in the council report and provided in the summary this afternoon, we respectfully request that council consider the planning arguments provided and issue and resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit for the removal of the tree.
Thank you, Ms Reynolds. Councillors, any questions re the removal of the tree? Councillor Peltz? Yep.
Do we know how old this tree is?
No, I do not.
Oh. Can we have some further explanation about the Indigenous part of it. I'm not really over that. It said something about the Indigenous Act. Can you explain that, please? You there, Nicole? Am I not talking? Can you hear me?
I think you're silent as well. It's referring, it's not, it doesn't have, it's a local native tree, Councillor Peltz, so it's Indigenous to the area.
There was something, oh yeah, dot point 4 says whether any part of the native vegetation to be removed, destroyed or lopped is protected under the Aboriginal Heritage Act 2006. Now that's the first time I've heard that mentioned, but I was curious as to what the issue is with it.
I lost my notes.
Can you hear us, Ms Reynolds?
It's gone.
We're here, we're just having some technical issues. We're both in Pike Street. We're just having some technical issues. Just bear with us for 1 second.
Is it possible for her to answer on your microphone?
I'll go and I'll go to Nicole's office. We'll have, yeah,
All right, I've got another question if you might be able to while you're looking it up. Just curious where the old ruling was, and I'm not sure whether it's still current. If you were to be granted to have a tree removed, you had to plant 7 in its place. Is that still a relevant planning issue or guideline?
So my understanding, Councillor Pales, is that, thanks Nicole. Do you want to answer the question or would you like me to?
That's fine, I don't mind.
Okay, you go.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Peltz, for your question. I do apologise for that. So the clause you refer to is 5217, which is the state provisions in relation to protection of biodiversity of native vegetation. So yes, the aim of the clause is to minimise removal, but where the minimisation does ultimately result in removal, that you can offset. So it's an offsetting provision. So on the basis that there's no net loss to native vegetation. With respect to the definition in around native and Indigenous, essentially native means anywhere to Australia. The use of the word Indigenous means that it comes from a certain area. So that's the difference in the language. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Councillor Tui, you've got a question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nicole, reading through this report, I gathered that there is, well, I wondered, I should say, if there is any potential to vary the building envelope to cater for this proponent's house. Is that something that that we could maybe work with in order to facilitate retaining the tree and this person building the house that they'd like to?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Tui. It is my understanding, I'm instructed by the planning officer who's been dealing with this matter, that every endeavour has been made with respect to the placement of the dwelling, that the tree be retained in the nomination of the building envelope and the nomination of the siting of the dwelling, and more particularly also in addition the placement of fill. As part of the consideration of the application for the dwelling, I believe we were able to come up with a position that allowed for the siting of the dwelling and also the protection of the tree.
So further to that, does that then mean that the, or do you assume that the applicant does not see it the same way? Would that be fair to say?
Thank you, Councillor Tui. It would, I believe, through asking for this application to be considered, that there is a disagreement with with reference to being able to retain the tree. I go back to my previous answer with relation to both the consideration of the subdivision and then the later decision with respect to the development of the dwelling on the land, that very carefully conditions have been crafted and drafted with respect to the siting of the dwelling to allow the tree to be retained with the dwelling siting.
Okay, thanks, Nicole.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, councillors?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. It comes back, two questions. One comes back to the definition of Indigenous. Now, in the vacant block adjacent to my own home premises, there was a beautiful native, and I call it native because I don't believe they're indigenous to East Gippsland, but coral tree in excellent condition, and council gave the owner of the block of land permission to cut it down, which he did a couple of weeks ago. Of course, naturally, I had people knocking on my door saying why were you allowing that. Can you provide me with some explanation as to what is the difference here? The applicant is making application to locate his or her new home on their block in a particular site, and there is a tree there that impedes that opportunity. So can you explain the difference between native, indigenous again, please, and why one tree can be chopped down and another can't when they're both healthy trees? Jody can answer that if you don't wish to, Nicole. I'm at ease.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis, for your question. I don't think I can add anything further.
I can add one. I don't know the specific answer to your question aside from what Nicole has explained, Councillor Ellis, except that this particular Indigenous tree is of significance to the Gippsland Lakes area. So it's the only location in Victoria where that particular tree is found to grow naturally. So I'm not sure if that helps, and I'm not even sure if that answers your question, but just in terms of additional explanation, I don't know the history of the tree that was cut down on the block opposite you. We would have to have a look at the information in relation to the issuing of that planning permit.
Not complaining about it.
Yeah, no, I'm just, yeah.
Okay, all right. The other question I had for Nicole was simply the positioning of the home, and I've read the applicant's email that they sent in, which was read out by Mr. Cannizzaro a couple of times now, but I'm just trying to refresh my mind. Was the removal of tree reliant on the best possible location for the premises, for the intended premises? And with that, did they plan to provide any revegetation on their block to compensate?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis, and my understanding of your question, and I'll do it justice where I can. There are two separate planning applications, or three. There's been a subdivision application which has been approved. Statement of compliance has been issued and the subdivision and the two lots have been created. The second application was the removal of the tree in question, which is this application. A third application was for the development of a dwelling on the newly created Lot 2, which is the subject of today's discussion. In consideration of the development of the dwelling application, which was triggered by virtue of the land subject to inundation overlay, the premise of the application, my understanding, is that the tree was to be retained, and that part of the conditions of the planning permit that allowed for the development of the dwelling required some amended plans and some further details with a specific aim of ensuring the protection of the tree in question. This was the amended plans around the tree protection zone, the placement of fill, and specific conditions around being able to trim the tree but not remove the tree, or remove vegetation generally on the site.
Thank you very much.
Is that Councillor O'Connell? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. This might sound like a silly question, but if the applicants do build their home with the tree intact and then down the line the tree does drop limbs and causes risk to their safety, who is responsible? Because we've said that they're not allowed to remove it and it is safe, so I'm just wondering what happens if it is deemed unsafe and something happens down the track.
Councillor O'Connell, the officers have made a recommendation based on the information that's available to them at the time, which is that there is no immediate hazards with the tree. So the assessment is that at this point in time, the tree is not any danger or at any danger of falling over or any danger of it's not a hazard. If in 2 years the applicants believe that the tree is creating a hazard, then that planning permit can be submitted and reconsidered, and the health of the tree at that time will then mean a decision is made.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Toohey now has another question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nicole, I'm just reading here in regards to the initial NVIM report, which was completed incorrectly. It says there, with a tree diameter measurement used to populate the circumference field. So are you suggesting that the wrong dimension was put in the wrong place, which gave us a report that was incorrect, and what difference that makes?
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. I'm going to struggle to answer this question. My understanding is the native vegetation removal report has been corrected, and that the difference between the diameter and the circumference of the tree has been amended, and that we are satisfied with the content of the native vegetation removal report.
The reason why I asked that question, Nicole, is that that paragraph there, maybe it's just me, but I'm sort of struggling to understand what that means. That is on page 27 of 670 pages. It's the very first paragraph on page 20, oh sorry, correction, on page 28. Are you able to read that?
Are we still having issues with our connections?
No, I'm not having... thank you. I'll have to take the question on notice to find the page and be able to provide an answer to that question, Councillor Toohey. I am unable to answer at this point.
No problems. No, that's fine. It's just I'm just trying to read it, and it's a bit confusing, perhaps only to myself. Thank you.
No, I agree with you, Colin. I think it's a bit confusing too.
I think what that's trying to say is that there were concerns with the report, that this is providing the background as to why we sought additional information and additional an additional report from the applicants, that it was assessed that there were deficiencies in the original report.
So Jody, I do note then that after that, an additional report was sent, which was peer reviewed, and it stated that the report was inadequate and a number of other things. So it's I'm just trying to understand that whole process and how that's worked. Because there's such a difference between two arborists' report is the issue that I'm grappling with. Now, granted, it could be seen from perhaps either point of view, but an arborist who doesn't know what sort of tree he's looking at is a bit of a problem. And, you know, that is that or is that not the case? It's hard to say.
It is hard to say, and we haven't sought or had a third arborist report in relation to the tree.
Mayor, can I ask a question of clarification then?
Yes, Councillor Reeves.
So my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jody or Nicole, that the report submitted by the applicant was considered insufficient. It had inconsistencies and an amendment was required. So the submitted report, and that was peer reviewed. So their report that they provided to support their application to remove the tree was insufficient.
That is our view, yes.
Yeah, that's what my reading of those paragraphs is too. They mistook the diameter for the circumference.
Yes, Councillor Reeves, that's our understand. That's our reading of the way that it happened, correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Tui wishes to ask another question.
So, Jody, if that's the case, and as I read this, a second report was put in. And that second report, am I reading this correctly, that the second report after a peer assessment was determined to be inadequate? Is that correct?
Sorry, I couldn't find my button. That is my understanding of the way that things happened, Councillor, yes.
All right, councillors, I feel that we've just about exhausted the question time on this subject also. So,
Could I have another one, please? Just a quick one. Is everything in order in relation to the closeness of the tree to the building, to the house that's going to be put there? That and all in order with the native vegetation in relation to the closeness of trees to dwellings, you know, with the fire things? Have they been amended to allow that? Because you couldn't have a tree within a certain distance of your house up until fairly recently. Is that so? Or is it, my question really is everything in that direction in order?
The short answer is yes, Councillor Buckley. It's not in a bushfire-prone area, so those requirements are a little bit different.
Thanks for that, Jody.
It's, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Buckley, it is in the document. It states that it's not in a bushfire-prone area. So, if that's the last of the questions, would a councillor like to move?
I'll move it, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. A seconder, please.
I'll second that.
Councillor Buckley. So, Councillor Reeves, you may wish to speak again to this.
I think the conversation's been exhausted. I'm satisfied the report is adequate, deals with the matter, again, with rigour and depth, and I have a full understanding of the reasons why there's a recommendation to refuse the application. Councillors, I ask you to support that.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to it? You need to unmute yourself. Well done.
Did you need any more comment from me?
You don't need to, no, not if you don't wish to speak.
No, I feel it's adequately covered, the discussion. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor Buckley. So do we have any speakers against? Oh, Councillor Rottino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've been thinking about this one a lot, and in particular I've been thinking about the comments from the owners of the property and the people that want to build their dream home. And as we all know, our home is our castle and we should feel safe in our home. Now, who are we to say how they should feel? If the owners have told us they feel unsafe because of that tree, how can we say that no, they shouldn't feel unsafe? I'm really concerned. We've had nothing in the report that addresses that issue of our customer, nor does it address anything to do with their potential mental health issues if they've got to sit and look at a tree which they deem to be unsafe. And I think that I can't support this in its current format. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chino. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against? Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to speak against, just purely from the point of view that I struggle with how two arborists can come up with quite different answers in regards to one particular tree, and I'm just not comfortable with this at all, I must say. It's not. I don't think it's going to work, and for reasons as Joe alluded to, in regards to what the customer would like. I understand that there are regulations, and the regulations are good for the most part, but I think sometimes there has to be some credit given to the opinion of the applicant as well. It is the applicant that will live there and see this tree every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Councillor Reeves, you have your right of reply. Sorry, I've got a hand waving across the screen. Sorry, Councillor Ellis.
No, thanks. I'll be very brief. It's just I'm wrestling with this one too, in the sense that I'd like to support it, but there's not enough strength there in a sustainable environmental argument. There's been no real push to keep the tree, and I refer back to my little example of my street with a very healthy tree being taken down to enable a house to go. It's the landowner's property. I'm really concerned about whether or not we're making the right decision here too. But the regulation, Joe's point about somebody's home, and if they take action to redress the loss of quality vegetation, I'm up in the air with this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Now, Councillor Reeves, your right of reply.
Thanks. Councillors, just stop and think for a moment. This is a planning matter, not a mental health matter, and this is what we have to make a decision on. Councillor Ellis, I believe I'm familiar with our coral tree. I think it's indigenous to northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. This is an indigenous tree, a remnant red gum on the Gippsland Lakes, a biosphere reserve. It's worth a fortune. It's worth a fortune not just to that property and the owners to have a remnant tree that could be over 100 years old, maybe even older, but it's worth a huge amount, as has been mentioned by many of the other commentaries that we've had about this, to wildlife, but also to the people in the area. It forms a contiguous whole. It forms a contiguous whole of the native vegetation in that Eagle Point area. And Eagle Point is desirable because of that native vegetation. And it adds to the wealth and the value of the properties, not just that are owned by the property owned by the proponents, but also the neighbours. So councillors, just consider this. Once it's gone, it's gone. And it won't be back for another 150 years. The planning department has issued a planning permit that allows the proponent to build a house and retain the tree. And that's I think, a great compromise, and it would be a great loss if this tree goes.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. All right, councillors, if there's no more discussion on the subject, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour of this officer's report, all those in favour? 4. All those against? And 4 against.
Casting vote, Mayor.
Who had the premonition at this morning's discussions that at some stage with an even number of councillors I would have to have the casting vote. So I will do so. And in terms of the of where we sit here, the status quo is that I will vote for the officer's recommendations. So I consider that will be that the tree stays. Just for the minute takers, we had Councillor Toohey, Councillor Rotino, Councillor Buckley, and Councillor Peltz and Councillor O'Connell who voted against the motion. So for the benefit of those keeping the minutes, thank you. So we now right. This one now is item 5.2.2, which is our Environmental Sustainability Strategy Annual Report Review for 2018 and 2019, which is authored by Rebecca Lamble. And looking at the screen, I can't see Rebecca unless she's the person on the phone. So, but anyway, if you could introduce it, please, Ms. Weigel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm very much hoping that the face without the identity without an identity sitting on your screen is our Manager of Sustainability and Waste Minimisation, Simon Arkenstall, who will present this report to Council. So I will hand over to Simon. If that's not Simon, I will then take up again, but let's see if that's Simon there.
It is, actually, I've got the video on, but obviously it's not coming through. Sorry, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There you are.
This report is obviously in relation to the Environmental Sustainability Strategy Annual Report, which outlines the major achievements, projected highlights and key performance indicators achieved against our environmental sustainability strategy. It's deemed an important tool for Council just to review the progress of the strategy's implementation, and it also is used as a mechanism for sharing and highlighting the Shire's activities. Highlights within the strategy's annual report have included improvements in Council's resource use and actions implemented to improve information and provide education activities for Council and the community. Following consideration by Council, the strategy annual report will be made publicly available and will be used to showcase the environmental sustainability work that Council has implemented during this period. The strategy ensures that environmental sustainability is considered a function of Council and is implemented as a part of the organisation's business responsibilities and management practices. Key issues, priority objectives and actions for East Gippsland identified within this strategy relate to Council's areas of influence, specifically what Council can act on, regulate and advocate for. The annual report does provide a summary of the highlights achieved over this period, and these are obviously provided in more detail in the attachment, which is the actual annual report for Council's consideration. Without going through the annual report itself, probably a number of the highlights have included the implementation of energy efficiency and solar on council's facilities, including the Bairnsdale City Oval and the hub in Bairnsdale and the Lakes Aquadome. It's estimated with the introduction of the solar panels, we will obviously reduce the amount of carbon dioxide, but also potentially make a saving up to $9,000 per year. The staff also implemented the renewable energy feasibility study, which can be broken down into 3 specific components. The first relating to a multi-site feasibility study, which involved up to 10 businesses within the Shire of differing sizes, with the aim of providing material to these businesses to look at the potential for saving energy, whether that be through the installation of solar or improved activities within their actual business. Through that 10 businesses, we had 6 take up or invest in the program, 3 in installing solar and 3 in investing in energy efficiency. Council also implemented the East Gippsland Shire bulk buy. The aim of this project was to make the solar systems for residential premises and small businesses a bit more financially viable, with 62 systems sold and 8 battery systems installed. This program, we utilised a local solar installer, and there were percentages of the purchases that were put back into a community solar system for a local project, and I believe that was the Cairn River community nursing facility. The program also looked at education, whether that be through our information hub, Energy for Seniors, household electrical advice and refrigeration efficiency masterclasses. In some of those programs we had 270 people attend, and so we did achieve some very good outcomes within that program. Lastly, just to touch base on, and just more for information, that we've also been involved in looking at charging stations for electric vehicles and trying to be strategic on how we locate and where to position these systems across the Shire. Based on that information, Council, I'll now hand over for any questions.
Happy to move it.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move that motion before council.
I think Councillor Peltz just jumped in ahead of you, Councillor Ellis.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Should second it then.
Yeah, I think I just might. Thank you. Gone very silent.
It has. What's happened to it? We've lost them in the chamber, have we? We're out on our own out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. My question to Simon is this is a really significant report, and I was buoyed by the comments around the charge stations, and I think with the significant interest in making the #1 highway the touring route through East Gippsland, I think we have an opportunity to think strategically about where we place those charging stations and, again, harness that opportunity. So I commend the officers for this fantastic report and look forward to seeing it unfold in the next few years.
So did I end up moving that or not?
I think you did, Councillor Peltz.
And I seconded it.
I did too.
So
Yeah.
we might put it to the vote, Mark.
We're out on the outside out here in video land, I think. The chamber seems to be...
Natalie, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay.
Right.
Mr Mayor, can you hear us? It's Anthony, the CEO. We seem to have lost the chamber.
Oh, we've lost the chamber.
God.
Is that what's happened? That's because I
there
didn't
we
have
go.
my...
Spaniards did that once.
My mistake. I got so flustered with the casting vote that I forgot to turn my microphone on. So we're all back.
In, Mr. Mayor, I've moved that. Dick seconded it, and yeah, we're up to that.
Yeah, okay. So please, Councillor Peltz has moved it, and could I have it from yourself, please, Councillor Ellis? You are seconding.
I am indeed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. All right, Councillor Peltz, you might wish to speak to this.
I'd just like to say, you know, it's a great progression. This environmental sustainability initiatives started maybe in the previous council, maybe the one before that, but you know, it's a great progression, and you know, we're looking at innovative ways of trying to keep up with the network, but you know, unfortunately the cost of electricity and the cost of things keeps going up and sort of taking away a lot of the benefits that we're actually achieving. But I mean, we've been in the forefront for probably a good 8 years now. So I think, you know, this is a really good progression, and I'm excited about some of the initiatives that are coming through on this report. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor Peltz. I'd actually just chime in a little bit there. Without us being proactive, what would the price be now? Even though we've had the increases, it certainly would have been much larger. So I think this is great. And I'm sorry for having my microphone off before when I said to Simon it was a great report. So, Councillor Ellis, you'd like to say something?
Just a few words in relation to attacking the issue that confronts council and our community of climate change, and that the actions that we're taking here are positive towards engaging in the challenges that the future front us. So as leaders in the community, we as a council are showing a positive approach by taking the actions that are highlighted in this strategy. It's not just a simple thing of saving money, it's also the wider thing of our wider environment. So I commend the work being done by our sustainability group within council, and the future projects that will come out of that office and before council to be adopted. I encourage everyone to pick up the strategy and become familiar with the actions that we are positively taking to address the challenges of climate change. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor Ellis. Anyone else wish to speak?
Let's make one note, if I can. Thanks, Mayor and councillors, that one of the priorities, as noted in the report, within the strategy relates to our areas of influence. Now, that is what we can act on, regulate or advocate for. And while we've got limited capacity for regulation and we can act on our own buildings and operations, I think the area of scope for us is advocacy. I did hear a report around some of the bushfire recovery areas in northern New South Wales where the power line providers saw the reinstatement of power up there as an opportunity to develop standalone systems rather than to reinstall gold-plated power lines across the landscape. And I think that this is an area that we can advocate for in future with our far-flung communities, joined by very vulnerable and susceptible to fire and storm damage power lines. And I think that you know, we've got a long way to go yet. And councillors, we should just remember and look elsewhere for the example of what's going on. It was a shame that in some respects that it was good that SP AusNet was so quick in their recovery, but sometimes that rapidity takes away the opportunity to look at innovative ways of renewal of infrastructure. Anyway, thank you for the report.
Councillor Rotino.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My comments in talking in favour of this motion, again, just supporting what Councillor Reeves just said and spoke about microgrids. I think there's the opportunity hasn't been lost because we're looking at redundancy and creating resilience in our communities, and that's all part of our sustainability strategy. But I'd also like to see in the next few years that our 20%ers will generate our 80% return on what we're doing here, and I'm talking about food waste. So as we get into the infrastructure that supports being able to recycle and reduce food waste, I believe we'll see significant step change.
Thank you for that, Councillor Atino. Now, Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also endorse this report, and some of the improvements that we've made have been quite outstanding, even regarding the tonnes of CO2 that we're not emitting now. The only disappointment, and it's not through anything that council have done, is the fact that whilst we've reduced the amount of energy that we all use, the fact that the cost has increased over the last 12 months is exceedingly disappointing, and it's something that I believe it seems at times that the harder we try, the more we're having to pay for it. But a great report with some fabulous numbers here. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Toohey. Just not expecting anyone to speak against, but I've got to ask, any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Good. So with that done, I think we could we put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's a unanimous decision. (5.3.1). This is our Omeo mountain bike destination project business case and master plan. So this is authored by Mr Tom Wetherill, who is present at this stage, but Ms Wogel would like to speak first. She's is actually the manager, so if she would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I hand over to Tom to take councillors through the report, I just wanted to acknowledge we have received a number of letters and emails about this item, and the vast majority in support of it. I think at Countdown, at the close of business yesterday, we had received 135 emails and letters, most of which have been passed on to the councillors. In case there are people wondering why their letter isn't being read out at the forum, I just wanted to acknowledge that those weren't received in a format that made them possible to be read out at the council meeting, but they have been distributed to the councillors and will be responded to in due course. So I just wanted to address that before Tom presented the report to you. But I'll now hand over to Tom, who's our Manager of Assets and Projects, to take you through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Mr Mayor. Good afternoon, councillors. This report marks a significant milestone for the Omeo mountain bike destination project. The past 12 months has seen the development of the complex master plan and the business case for the project. This report seeks council's formal receival of both of those documents. The key objective of this project is to realise economic and social benefits through increased visitation to the Omeo region as a result of the mountain bike complex. Development of the business case has clarified that this objective can be realised, concluding positive benefit cost ratios which are driven by increased visitation and injection of expenditure into the local economy. This translates to new jobs, particularly for existing and future service industries. Recognising this economic stimulus, both the Victorian and Australian governments have contributed $1 million and $1.5 million to the project respectively. Drawing from previous project planning work spanning approximately 4 years, development of the Omeo mountain bike complex master plan has comprised detailed field surveys of all proposed tracks and trails, complex cultural heritage assessments, complex biodiversity assessment, track and trail design, cost estimates and delivery sequencing and planning. Much of the project area is located on Crown land, managed by DELP and Parks Victoria, with the Mount Mesley Reserve area encompassing Livingston Park being managed by Council. There is an area of Crown land that is currently licensed for grazing by an adjacent owner. Officers have been working with the state government departments to draft an agreement in the form of a memorandum of understanding that will allow for implementation of the project on Crown land and its operation into the future. Officers have been working with DELP to ensure there is no cost associated with use of the land. This report seeks Council's authorisation for the CEO to continue to negotiate and enter into these arrangements which are critical for the progression of the project. Consultation is continuing with respect to any members of the community that will be adversely impacted by the project's proposal in terms of their current use of the Crown land, which encompasses the project area. The master plan considers in detail the project's impact on biodiversity, particularly natural vegetation. Further consideration or consultation, with DELP has been undertaken with respect to establishing a site on Crown land within the project area to cater for the required vegetation offsets generated by the removal to cater for this project. Entering into an agreement with DELP to establish an offset area on the project site will negate the need to purchase vegetation offsets, however noting that Council will need to manage the offset area for a period of 10 years. That the exact size of that area is currently being established. Management of the offset area throughout that 10-year period is therefore the only cost associated with those offsets. The master plan details design of 121 kilometres of track and trail network, and that comprises in 3 categories, 55 kilometres of high priority trails. They include 9 trails, mix of abilities, and 4 additional access tracks, several bridges and structures in and around Livingston Park, further trailhead works in Livingston Park, and a secondary trailhead area at Mount Sam Road. The second package, the medium priority category includes 7 additional trails and 1 link trail. That also includes further trailhead development at the Mount Sam Summit site. The third priority, the low priority trail group, comprises 4 additional trails with a length of 30 kilometres. The high, medium and low priority packages of work have been estimated within the master plan at $2.93 million, $1.59 million and $1.35 million respectively for each of the high, medium and low categories. Amounts that differ quite considerably from estimates in early reports. Currently available budget aligns with the package of high priority works. However, officers propose to tender all high and medium priority trails as stage 1. The initial extent of trails to be constructed in the initial stage, will be subject to assessment of the tender prices versus the project budget available at the time. The report also seeks Council's approval to advocate for further funding, if needed, to realise the full scope of work detailed within the master plan. In terms of next steps, works are continuing over coming weeks to finalise the Cultural Heritage Management Plan for the project, which is well progressed, conclude the biodiversity assessment requirements, including calculation of the specific offset area, and continue to consult with those in the community that may feel some adverse impact from the project's delivery. The contract for the design and construction of the pump and skills track associated with the mountain bike complex, which is located within Livingston Park, will soon be awarded for construction by the end of 2020. Planning permit application will follow for the trail implementation shortly, and the report indicates the intent to tender the first stage of works, which is proposed to be in parallel with the planning permit application process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tom. Now, councillors, any questions relating to this, the mountain bike track? No questions?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Peltz, then Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I need some explanation on why the offset is, being delivered to council when it's a joint council DELP project, and DELP is the official state government body of looking after forests and fauna matters and flora for all that matter. But I'm sort of curious as to why they're not getting any, not having to take on any responsibility in that manner. I mean, it's a joint project. And whilst we might be the developers, I sort of really feel once this project's finalised, it should be handballed over to Parks or DELP or someone like that to manage, and then us walk away without having to pay ongoing costs for it, because they virtually just see us as a cash cow. But I'm curious as to what extent they're actually coming to the table and delivering their guidelines.
So that's your question, is it, as to why DELP?
Yeah, why we're actually having to deal with the offset, us, and they're not taking on any of it.
Okay, well, we could
I think
have that as a question, as why are DELP charging us for a joint venture? So would you like to answer that, please, Ms. Weigel or Tom? Okay, Tom.
I can answer that one, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Peltz. In terms of the governance framework around this project, Council is the project advocate. Council is the one progressing this project. It is delivered with funding from the state government and Commonwealth government. The project area is currently located on Crown land. In order to progress this project, we're seeking tenure over that land to firstly implement the trail network, and secondly operate it on an ongoing basis. But with regard to the transfer of any money associated with the offsets, I'll just clarify that point, that DELP have facilitated the offset area to be established on the project site. So this arrangement does not result in council paying for offsets. It results in establishing a site on the project area in which there will be management obligations for a 10-year period. So there's no fee to DELP, there's no upfront cost. It's really the management of that land for 10 years. It's something that the DELP have done to try and facilitate a path forward for this project, and without that assistance we would be in the market of trying to procure those offsets elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Ellis, you had a question.
I do. It's going to be difficult in this circumstance with this motion before council, as it's only a notation recommendation, but there's a number of questions, of course, that come out from the briefing and the presentation of the two documents. Just to highlight, the vegetation offsite is a vast area. It's 150 hectares, 370 acres. It's a big area, but I'm not too much concerned about that. That's something that will come out. Looking at the rival to this project, the Yarra Ranges Council's Warburton mountain bike track of $11 million expenditure. I note, Tom, that there's a environmental effects statement demand being placed onto that project in just recent times, perhaps in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Now, they're well down the track compared to where we are. Can you tell me, are we likely to be confronted with the impost of another expensive thing? I hear that Kelbar are claiming, I think it's $3 million of expenditure for their mine at Glen Elladale. Thanks, Mark. $4 million at Glen Elladale. So we could be up for another high expenditure with this. Can you make any comment as to the risk we face with that possibility?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Only so far as I am aware that the Warburton project has triggered an EES process. Over the past, or pretty much through the development of the master plan, there's been considerable consultation with DELP who are the Victorian authority with regard to vegetation removal. More recently, there's been consultation with the internal planning team. At no point during those conversations has triggers for an environmental effects statement been raised. So at this point in time, Councillor Ellis, it has not been flagged in any way as relevant to this project. So and I'm not familiar with why Warburton has triggered the EES process, but I can only assume it is due to the classification and extent of vegetation that's been impacted by that development.
Okay. If I may, I have a couple of other questions, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to clarify on the high priority, looking at our reduced budget. So I'll just talk on figures for a moment. In previous in-council briefings, we've been told that $1 million of our capitals for this project have already been allocated or spent. Is that right?
That's correct. So that $1 million, Councillor Ellis, comprises the master plan itself. It comprises the pump and skills track. It comprises other trailhead infrastructure works in Livingston Park. So there's a number of elements that comprise that $1 million, and not all of it has been expended to date. It's predominantly been the contract for the master plan development, but there is additional funding allocated to other elements of the project aside from trail implementation itself.
Yeah, but just to clarify, those infrastructure monies were for Livingston Park under a separate project, even though they two joined together as the head of the trails point. Those monies were for the Livingston Park and the other work that council had been doing, and which was, as I say, interjoining.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ellis. Just to clarify, of the $4 million budget, $1 million has been allocated to the master plan, the pump and skills track, other trailhead works, signage, a range of different elements for the project management, for example. There's a number of elements that make up that $1 million, which will not be utilised on direct implementation of the trail network. However, having saying that, a large portion of it has been used for design, development, and planning and approvals, etc. that will allow that to happen.
Okay, fine. And the whole purpose of my questioning, of course, and challenge to this project is taking care of ratepayers' investment for the ratepayers of the whole of East Gippsland. So I'm concerned about the costings, and I look at the estimates, because these reports that we have now, the master plan, which is a good piece of work, there's no doubt, the business document, which is an interesting read, are based on a new project in a sense, because we as council adopted the dirt art project, the feasibility study. That's the project that we were presenting. So now we have a bit of a different creature. Has there been any independent challenge or review of the costs of these estimates that are in the new briefing, in the new business plan and what have you?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. No, there's been no third-party QS or similar peer review of the costings associated with this project.
Okay, thank you. Look, I'll let some other councillors ask some questions, and I'll come back to you if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. We've had, here's a couple of the ones in the chamber here. As Councillor Toohey has a question, and then Councillor Tino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, I do have two questions. The first one is, do you know what the cost of the offset would be if we were just to pay for that up front?
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. No, we don't. And there's a critical reason for that, and that's that some of the species-specific offsets that are triggered as a result of the impact aren't currently available on the market. They don't exist. So the alternative is essentially trying to find freehold land that is would contain that species of vegetation, and negotiate with those owners to register it and reach a brokering agreement, essentially. So it's a market-based price, and at the moment the market doesn't contain those species-specific offsets, so it is very, very difficult. The advice from our consultants is it could be in the vicinity of 500 plus, but it is really we're given that the market doesn't currently provide the required species, it's impossible to put a number on that, Councillor Toohey. Thank you.
All right, so thanks, Tom. What I'll take from that is that it would be more than the cost of managing it ourselves. Would that be fair to say?
I think so, and I think particularly when you look at it from the perspective of DELP allowing us to establish this offset area on Crown land for no charge, really the other alternative is that council buys some freehold land or leases or comes to a negotiation with a freehold landowner and essentially does the same thing. But obviously in any of those other alternatives, of significant upfront capital acquisition costs or leasing costs or other forms of compensation. So,
sure.
Yeah.
As opposed to, of course, this cost will be spread out over time and reduce as time goes by. So, okay, so I'm looking at it thinking, well, it would be cheaper to do it the way that's been suggested. My second question is in regards to Crown land. Now, Crown land is because we have, I believe, one person with an issue up there in regards to Crown land. Now, Crown land is land that is owned by the people. Let's make that very clear. It's not the government's, it's owned by the people. Now, that Crown land that is being used by somebody at the moment, Crown land, as I understand, is leased to people whilst there is no need for that land to be used for other requirements. But when other requirements are identified, those leases can be terminated. Thank you. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, Councillor Toohey, there's a number of mechanisms, leases and licences that are administered through DELP to allow private individuals to use Crown land, public land, for different purposes. You know, it's very common to get a grazing licence, for example. And yes, if the situation changes, those arrangements can be altered. That's correct.
Yep, that's great. Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Thanks, Joe. Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Weatherall. I just had a question in relation to the master plan. It, as you pointed out, is a significant document, a significant piece of work, but the reason that master plan was so detailed and so significant in its work was that all the approvals were gained along the way. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Rattino. All of the assessment needed to progress the approvals is encompassed within the master plan project. So the project team has, as noted earlier, conducted a comprehensive biodiversity assessment, which is leading us to where we are now, discussing offset requirements, etc., and cultural heritage investigation, which we are currently progressing, and the Biosis project team are assisting with that through the CHMP process with AV. So it's those two key approvals rolling along in parallel to this based on the assessment and investigative work that was part of the master plan project.
So just a quick follow-up one then, Mr. Weddell. So if that's the case, then if there was any need for an EES, that would have been identified, and clearly there's no need for one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Attino. Look, I certainly would expect that through the expertise of the project team and the consultation with other various departments, if there was any trigger for EES, that would have been identified through this process. Yes.
Councillor Peltz, you've got your hand up. You wish to ask another question?
Yeah, I was curious as to whether DELP actually do grow their own plant species, and I was wondering whether there was any room for contribution from them with regards to the offset in the way of plants and them providing plants and taking a bit of expense away from that area in that avenue, because they have a quite an extensive seed collection, and they have people growing them for them, and I think that's sort of an avenue that could also be negotiated as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Peltz. I guess just to clarify again, the offset area won't comprise the planting of vegetation. It will comprise of protecting an area of relevant vegetation that's been impacted as a result of the project. So that's been identified, a suitable site. That vegetation exists. It's about protecting it, fencing it, keeping it free of weeds, etc., stock, pest animals, those sorts of activities. This won't involve the planting of trees, and through that proposed agreement, DELPA is essentially giving council access to that vegetation already. So, thank you.
Was that your hand, Councillor Ellis? I think it was.
Yeah, just if there's no one else, Mr. Mayor.
So you've got one more question for Tom, have you?
Couple more, yeah. Okay. Am I right to go? I can't see what you're doing.
Yes, sorry. Just.
Okay, thanks. Tom, the money that provided by the council, the ratepayers' money, is 1.5 million, and that's been kept in our footpaths little bucket of money for the pathways all throughout the rest of the Shire. Have we taken any monies that should have been allocated for the footpaths to go to the trails, for these bike trails? Or is it just simply that one-off grant that was put into that funding line?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Ellis, just with regard to the first comment, the $1.5 million allocation from council stands on its own in terms of it's been allocated to this project, so it's not in a broader footpath program or not allocated in any other way. It's allocated to this project. There has been no other funding aside from that 1.5 allocated to this project at all. There is projects in the draft 2021 capital program that relate to footpaths within Omeo, within Livingston Park, specifically a path connecting the Omeo Caravan Park with Livingston Park. Thank you.
So that's that extra 20,000. I wrote it down as 200,000, but it's actually 20,000 extra.
I'm sorry, Councillor Ellis, I can't remember the exact amount off the top of my head, but I am aware that that's more than 20,000. It was in the vicinity of about 100,000, I think, for that separate but supporting project. Yep.
Now, this is a question that you may not be able to answer, Tom, so if you can't, please just say no. I have no knowledge, because I wouldn't want to drag you out. Councillors received a letter from a Mr. Connolly in relation to his position. Now, when I partook in the decision-making process for the project, believed that all parties, right, the 4 parties involved in this matter, Parks Victoria, DELP, Shire of East Gippsland, and Mr Conley, were of a common thread. They all supported the project. Now, in the last fortnight, we've received a letter from Mr Conley saying that he has not been brought up to date and he objects to the project. So one of the partners in this project is very unhappy and is asking the trails to be moved and that there's an unfair imposition on his property. Now, I asked the CEO to distribute to council, and also he was saying he was not being informed on what was going on. Now, I asked the CEO to provide information to councillors as to how accurate that was. Was he clearly telling us the truth, or was there a lack of communication and support from one of the major land holding, even though it's under lease, partners? The information was provided to us councillors, but it seems as if the last correspondence to him was in 2018. So I'm asking you, do you have knowledge of Mr Conley being in contact with any of the senior officers or officers in council so that his concerns were addressed? That's the question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ellis. Look, not personally, not from a personal perspective, I don't have that knowledge. What I do know is that landholders were consulted at the initiation of this project, so that would have been sometime in mid-2019. Some concerns were heard. The design response has included some amendments to preliminary layouts, and we've recently communicated that back to some parties that have expressed some concern, I guess, with the proposal and the implementation of some of these trails. So it's probably about the best I can provide, Councillor Ellis. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, has the master plan document that has been provided to council, which each of us have a copy of, and it's on the council webpage as part of our agenda today, has that been altered in any way? Have the trails been altered in any way to perhaps say accommodate the complaints of Mr Conley or any other of the complainants, if there are other complainants?
So the trails were amended, and some of the trailhead infrastructure were amended as part of, in response, so it was a design response to some of those concerns that were raised in mid-2019, but I acknowledge that it appears that some of those alterations and changes perhaps weren't well communicated. So I acknowledge that, Councillor Ellis. Thank you.
Okay, so, but the master plan that we have in front of us with all the plans for the trails, that is what the project is. It hasn't been changed.
That's correct. This is the final version, yes. The version in the agenda, correct.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'd be interested to see what Mr Conley says about that, because he was suggesting that he wanted movements, and I think councillors will agree that they've got a copy of a map or something he sent in with suggested movement of the project's trails, often as far as 500 metres away from their intended area. So I was just concerned that could that alter the information that you have in front of you, which you've been providing us to council. So is that possible?
So that map that was initially provided was based on the DIRDA report, as I understand it. So from that alignment, from those preliminary alignments, there was fairly significant alterations made, which are reflected in the current version of the master plan, which is in the agenda, in response to concerns that were raised at the commencement of this project in mid-2019.
Okay, thanks. And my final question is, will the bike trail users be like boat owners and users of the Shire's boat ramps across the Shire be user-free? That is, there'll be no cost to any user of the cyclist or any other sort of user of those facilities.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. I think cost recovery could encompass a whole range of different sources, and it's certainly something that there's no clear strategy at this point in time. It's something that has potential to be investigated further, and that could be through sponsorship, through events, through day pass type arrangements. There's a number of avenues. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. I would suspect after all that there will be no more questions, so would look to somebody to move this, please. Councillor O'Connell. Thank you, Natalie. And a seconder.
Mr Mayor, I was going to invite Councillor Buckley.
He's just put his hand up to second it, Councillor Rattine. Are you happy with that? Right. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. So, Councillor O'Connell, you must wish to speak to this project.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm really excited to be able to move this recommendation. It's been a long time to reach each milestone, and this is an important and exciting milestone in the project. This first came to light back in 2016 before this current council, and I want to acknowledge the council officers at the time who did identify Omeo as a potential mountain biking destination, and they invited World Trail to come and have a look at the town, and they walked the terrain, and it was at the public meeting that night where we had an overwhelming amount of people in support of the concept then, that World Trail really said this could be the next Derby, if not better. And from then it's just progressed. The BTA helped to fund the feasibility study in conjunction with the Shire, which produced some really exciting economic benefits to it, and then the latest business case has just confirmed that. The project is in our council plan, which we will be recommending for a revised council plan later on today. It's in the Destination Gippsland Management Plan priorities, our One Gippsland GLGN group. I guess it's no secret that towns like Omeo and within the Omeo region have been struggling for some time with the decline of certain industries, and after the drought and then bushfires and COVID, it's never been a better time now to activate this project and start to stimulate the economy. We've already seen from the influx of support letters that we've seen over the last 4 days just how much support there is, and already how much investment we've seen in the area. From one investor, he's already spent $2.2 million in property and intends on spending much more to develop those properties, create jobs and create further businesses. So it really is an exciting time. It's important to acknowledge that to have strong, viable, smaller communities like Omeo, like Orbost, like Mallacoota, it then provides that greater benefit to our larger regional centres like Bairnsdale, like Lakes Entrance, that everyone goes to these largest towns to conduct all of their business and all their shopping. So the benefits will be seen right throughout the Shire. It's also important to note one of the important stakeholders has been Omeo District Health. They've been actively engaged throughout the process, and they're developing a new doctor model to be prepared for the influx of tourists to the area. And yeah, I cannot commend this recommendation enough to the rest of the councillors. The town, the community, and as we've seen from the letters of support, people from right across the Shire, from right across this, the state are so excited to see this project develop, and we know that the pump track is soon to be awarded, and to start to see some actual activity will really just enhance the excitement around the town. So I'll leave it at that and let others speak in support. Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Councillor Buckley, you've seconded the motion. Would you like to speak to it, please? You need to unmute. That's it. You've got it.
I've got it now, I think.
Yes.
You got me now?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Councillor O'Connell, for all those comments. I think you're right on the money there. And I've had, well done. And I've had strong comments from some people that are criticising our delay in getting on with the job. And one particular strong commenter said, well, you better get the Chinese to do it and they'll have it done by the weekend. And so there is very strong support for it. And thank you for your comments and pushing it along as hard as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Others wish to speak? Councillor Rotino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Pleasing to see our council plan, which you most recently endorsed for its last iteration for this last term of this current council. And one of the key projects identified in that was the Omeo mountain bike project. So it is a milestone meeting tonight. I also like to mention a recent Regional Australia Institute report which indicates that millennials are moving to regions in droves, and it's infrastructure like the Omeo mountain bike park that attracts millennials to regions. And I know Regional Councils Victoria, who supported this Regional Australia Institute report, are big supporters for infrastructure that attracts particularly young people to our regions. And Councillor Pels is a Gippsland representative on Regional Councils Victoria, so I'm sure she's supportive of this initiative. It's no shock to you, Mr Mayor, that I'm a big supporter of this project and a big supporter of anything that creates economic stimulus. I've never ever tried to hide the fact that I've been a strong advocate for this project, and I'd be staggered if anyone didn't think that I was a strong advocate for it. In fact, in 2018, when all the funding was secured from the federal and state government, it was widely broadcast and televised, so I would think that almost everybody in the region would know that I'm a big advocate for it. And and I'll continue to be a big advocate for it until it's finally built, and despite personal attacks, I'll continue to do that. But for the record, Mr Mayor, I cannot think of any other East Gippsland Shire project that has received a significant unified regional support along with grants from all tiers of government. This project has been business case to within an inch of its life. I can't think of any other project that I've been involved with in this term of council that's had anywhere near this sort of scrutiny. So in 2018, we got a Building Better Regional Funds grant. RDV Victoria gave us a state grant of $1 million, or it might have been $1.2 million. It's on the RDV regional priorities. One Gippsland, which was a former Gippsland Local Government Network, endorsed this as a project to the state government budget, going way back into 2017-18. Destination Gippsland have it identified as a priority for the Regional Destination Management Plan. Latrobe Valley Authority, who have engaged Melbourne University to do smart specialisation around visitor economy, have seen this as a priority project in the Gippsland Tracks and Trails strategy. The Committee for Gippsland recently sent us a letter of support, and I don't mind saying that I advocated for them to send that, and I don't care who knows about that. You can say whatever you like. I can't see how you can get in trouble for advocating for a council-approved project. And interestingly, the Committee for Gippsland have said in their letter of support that this project will have the ability to secure a national annual event which will grow participation and bring many to Omeo and the surrounding district and Victoria. Victoria doesn't currently have a competitive mountain bike event, so this is the project that could anchor one of those projects. The Omeo community and the Business and Tourist Association, I take my hat off to that group that have been working on this project way back in 2015 and still riding the waves. As I said, we secured the money in 2018. If this was a private sector project, we would have had it built in March 2019. Anyhow, we are where we are. It's a milestone night and I support the project, and the reason we're doing it is to enhance our visitor economy. In fact, I'll quote Jeremy Thorpe, an economist for PwC, who has stated that experiential tourism pre-COVID-19 was growing at close to 20% per annum, and post-COVID-19, when people can't travel overseas and looking for stuff to do in the regions, he's quoting that it's going to be double-digit growth. So, Mr Mayor, whatever way you look at this project, it's a winner for our region, and I encourage and ask all our councillors here tonight to vote for it. I mean, the 135 letters of support as of last night, and those letters came locally, regionally, nationally. There was a letter of support from Cannondale Mountain Bike Racing Team. There's been letters of support from Canada. I'm not sure what else we need, but we just need to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Attino. Councillor Toohey, you wish to speak for or against?
Wish to speak for, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ben. I know how you feel. It's a bit hard to follow a statement like that. Look, I would like to speak in support of this the business plan, and I look forward to being part of creating something that will be there for a long time and provide much needed benefits to Omeo and East Gippsland overall. Thank you.
Good. Do we have any other speakers, either for or against?
Very briefly, Mayor, thank you. I'd like to contribute.
Councillor Reeves.
Well, councillors, I haven't heard one sensible, measurable, achievable, reasonable or timely reason not to do this. Nothing is smarter than doing this project. So some councillors and some members of the community might be challenged by this project because it is a very new piece of work. The whole mountain bike gravity industry is very new, and it's really come on the back of the green season in Northern Hemisphere ski industry. So we're only talking the last 20 years, and it's a bit of an act of faith for us who haven't actually participated in this industry to see where it could go. But having seen the likes of Whistler and Vancouver, and their green season industry is now bigger than their winter season, I think that the opportunity for Omeo and across the Victorian Alps is clear, and it's been articulated very, very coherently by Councillor Attino. Whimsically, the only extra dot point I put on the recommendation is to get on with it. Let's go. Thanks, councillors.
Councillor Peltz.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to follow on from Councillor Attino's statistics, and being the region is one of the great reports that rural councils put out was that for any one job in a rural area is equivalent to 16 jobs in a Melbourneised area. So realistically, the figures that they're actually quoting here, and it says during the construction phase they're saying up to 16 jobs, and then ongoing running jobs they're saying 20 to 39 things and stuff. So they're looking like a pretty good figure for the Omeo region to have employment off the back of this mountain bike development. So, looking at it, it's a bonus, and it's a good spend for this state government. I think and the federal government. I think the money will be well used, and I just wanted those figures to be stated that it's not just 20 people or 40 people in Omeo, it's the rest that stem off from it too. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Ellis? Councillor Ellis? Yeah.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I guess I'll be the last speaker in this matter. I'm going to have to return back to a few words I said when I was asking the questions earlier, and that is to remember that this particular motion before Council this evening is a notation motion. That is, it's asking councillors to note the situation in relation to a motion that we adopted, a project we adopted and support now as a whole of council. So there's no debate here today whether the project should or should not go ahead, because that's already a declared action of council. And it's now for us to consider to manage the project properly and financially responsibly, to look at the experiences that we've had elsewhere and to ensure that the negatives that have occurred elsewhere do not occur in this current project. It's also to a realisation too that we are not alone in this world. Mark is quite right when he highlights the growth of the sport. I'm well read on that and seeing the growth. And I also acknowledge the support from the Omeo community. In fact, I'd like to thank all those people who responded to Councillor Rotino's call for support in the last few days. And it was really great to read some of the success stories, the pride some of the people have in their families, the aspirations they have for their businesses and for their families into the future. So they're all positive things, and there is positivity that can come out of this. But as managers of the East Gippsland Shire, which the council is, each one of us is responsible, we also have to ask the harder questions. Doesn't make you popular, but unfortunately that's what leadership's about. We've had the experience of a popular project before, tearing the heart out of the community, and I refer back to Mallacoota and the Bastion Point boat ramp, and recall that split a community too. So in the great number of emails we've received, we've also had other emails telling us of the financial perils of this project. So we have to take these things into account. We can't just dismiss them. Bastion Point shows us that. As councillors well know, we are now being faced with approximately $250,000 of ratepayers' money, not funding, not grants, but ratepayers' money per annum to keep the boat ramp open. And we were informed recently that we will be up for in excess of $1 million to replace the dredge at Bastion Point. It's not meeting the job. Now, knowing these things and experiencing these things throws us back to acknowledging the opportunities that the bike trails offers us. Know the challenges, know the costs, and see if we can manage them. Do we have enough money? Can we gain further grants? Can our local MPs somehow squirrel some money away for us? Can we plead somewhere else to make this a success? Do we have the right people? Does the money that we're investing through the grant stay in Omeo? Does it stay in our East Gippsland community? Or does the money go back to Tasmania? Or does it go to Melbourne? Does it stay with us? We have to answer those questions and be challenging in the coming projects that come before us, such as the tenders and what have you. It is something that I have had to challenge, this project. It is an adopted project, as I said, so it's only a notation. But councillors, please do not be afraid of challenging the costs of this project, remembering that we at Omeo the project is only one of 4 mountain bike projects listed in the Destination Gippsland Futures report for mountain biking. So, and I also think from memory, and Joe will be able to tell me this, whether Darren Chester has provided money for a mountain bike track at Latrobe City. You know, today a mountain biker was talking to me and told me about the big state park at the Yuyangs, something I've been overlooking. We've been focused on the competition from Warburton and of course over the mountains and been worried about those sorts of things. So it's a very competitive market, and we need to make sure that we cross our T's, dot our I's, and ensure that the money's invested, because it's all public monies. The grants in what you pay for in your taxes is well invested to give Omeo the best outcome, and that's what we're seeking here today. So I'm happy to support the notation of the report, because that's exactly what it is. It's a report to be noted and to be challenged at different times. And I do ask officers to try and resolve the issue with Mr. Colley. You cannot go into a project when one of your partners is unhappy, because you're doomed for problems. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, with no more discussion...
Can I just have my right of reply?
Well, I suppose we should allow this, Natalie, although nobody spoke against it. So you were mayor last year, what would you do? Say yes. Say yes. Yes, go ahead.
No, well, I just want to thank the words of support from the other councillors, and also acknowledge all the letters that people sent in. I think it does demonstrate exactly how important this project is to not only the Omeo region but the whole of the Shire. As Councillor Reeves stated around the cycling, you know, the North East has demonstrated just exactly you know, how profitable and how beneficial that sport has been to that area. And this destination mountain bike trail here will connect North East to the Gippsland area, and it'll become a real destination holiday for enthusiasts but also beginners. And I think that's the key there, with Councillor Ellis speaking before, is that that's what sets Omeo apart with that business case, and the importance of this recommendation in seeking further funding to complete the 120 kilometres is because it is a destination, and that is what sets us apart from the Yuyangs. It will set us apart from Warburton because it's a day trip for Melbourne. This isn't a day trip. People will have to spend 3-4 days in Omeo, but they'll probably spend 10-12 days, because they'll do Cahoon, they'll do Mount Taylor, they'll do Omeo, and then they'll head over to the northeast. So it's a real win for our region, but also for the state of Victoria, because of what we will see and what we've already seen. So, and I think that's the real benefit in the recommendation, is that, you know, it's the officers are seeking further funding to complete this trail that was indicated in the business case. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor, and commend it all to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. So I think without delaying any longer, we can put this to the vote, councillors. So all those in favour? Thank you very much. So that is unanimous. I'm not sure whether as chair I'm allowed to say anything, but I would just say to the people of the high country, I would wish you all the very best. If I get into trouble from Mr Cannizaro for saying that, I'll cop it sweet, because I do mean that. I wish them, all those people who live up in our remote regions, I wish them all the very best in their project and for the future. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, can I just put in I need to leave now. I've got guests arriving. I didn't think this would travel on so long this day, so I'm going to bid you a departure. So bye for now, and I can't attend any longer. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Peltz. Of course, we have our budget paper
well,
next.
It's a bit about luck. I've got guests at my door, and they're wanting to come in. I can't leave them outside. It's going to get dark, so I'll talk to you later next week. Bye.
All right.
Goodbye.
Mayor, is that a timely moment just for a 3-minute pit stop?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should, because I keep looking to our closed session and thinking that was a chance, but it's still a way off. That could be a very good idea, Councillor Reeves. Could our technical team please arrange for just a short break? And please let us know when the live streaming has...
Standing orders, do we, CEO?
Sorry, Mark?
Do we need to suspend standing orders, CEO? Is there a technicality here?
No, it's just an adjourn the meeting. No, simple.
Yeah, it's just an adjournment for probably 5